Chapter 445, Stupefied Peter. Ron wailed helplessly, his voice breaking, but Harry covered his mouth and whispered in his ear.
Leave it, there's an aura coming up, let's go.
Downstairs, the sound of rushing footsteps reached them. Ron looked again at the spot where his wand had fallen and saw that the Dementor had flown off somewhere with it. At the same time, Sirius was watching the commotion outside the observatory, hoping that Harry and the others would escape. However, he was also keenly aware that the Dementors seemed different from before, having become less irritable. None of the Dementors even came close to him during this time, and most of them gathered around Peter as if they were discussing something.
Don't forget what happened before. This is a carefully planned plot by the Ministry of Magic. Those cunning wizards are testing our true obedience to decide what to do with us in the future.
After Ivan's brainwashing, the Dementors in the observatory finally settled down and stopped making noise. Ivan was secretly relieved. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were really good at causing trouble. He did not expect them to be able to come all the way here and make such a huge mess after he had concealed Sirius's location. If not for him, they would have been caught red-handed by the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic and would have been punished at the very least. That would have been troublesome. Fortunately, he had dealt with it in time.
Can Dementors use magic?
Ivan muttered to himself, raising his right hand. Through his blurred vision, he could see that the rotten, shriveled flesh of his arm was almost glued to his bones, and his scabbed fingers were clenched around a wand.
It's all in the air.
Ivan shook his arm and aimed it at Peter. As soon as the incantation was uttered, Ivan's magic was quickly activated, but when it reached his wand, it met with some resistance, and his magic became intermittent. Fortunately, he was able to follow the wand's instructions and release it, hitting Peter. Peter was now curled up in a corner under the Dementor's torture. When he was hit by the white light, he began to convulse and tremble. It lasted for a while before Peter fainted.
It seems that it's better not to cast spells casually in this form.
Ivan couldn't help but mourn for Peter for a second, sighing to himself. During this delay, the two Aurors guarding the observatory heard the commotion and rushed over. They looked at Peter, who was lying on the ground, and became nervous. One of the Aurors checked Peter's breathing and sighed in relief. He turned to look at the Dementors and asked with a frown.
He's fine, he just fainted.
Someone came in.
Ivan answered brokenly, leaning forward and mimicking Dementors. The Dementors floating around didn't argue. To creatures without sight, they only knew that someone had slipped into the observatory and attacked them with a Patronus charm, then slipped away.
What? Someone's trying to rescue Peter Pettigrew.
The two Aurors recalled Peter's identity as a Death Eater and realized the gravity of the situation. Sirius, on the other hand, was confused. He was worried when the Aurors questioned the Dementors, but the Aurors came to the same conclusion. Dementors, however, were often synonymous with chaos, and Sirius wasn't surprised when he found out about it. He was about to be cleared of all suspicion, so there was no need to save him. The only person he could save was Peter. The Aurors had the same thought, so they did not doubt Ivan's words and turned their attention to the unconscious Peter. One of the Aurors waved his wand and summoned a basin of water to water Peter, intending to wake him up and question him about what had happened. Ivan and Sirius saw this and became nervous. Ivan was unsure if his previous memory charm would have the desired effect. Sirius had no idea that Peter was under the memory charm and was worried that Peter would reveal Harry's presence. Under everyone's gaze, Peter slowly woke up. However, his expression was strange and gloomy in the night. He looked around the room and sneered.
Ignorant fool, the Dark Lord will return.
Peter's sudden words caused the faces of the two Aurors to change, and a chill ran down their spines. Then they woke up violently and punched Peter in the face to wake him up.
Who am I? Where am I? Why am I here?
Chapter 446, Amnesia of Peter Pettigrew.
And who are you people? Why are you tying me up?
Peter's face grew more and more dazed as he tried to struggle free of the ropes. Peter's words stunned the two Aurors. They looked at Peter suspiciously and questioned him sternly.
Don't pretend, you'd better tell us who came to your rescue.
Peter was so confused by their questions that he didn't really understand what they were talking about. Bits and pieces of memories flashed through his mind, but they were too scattered to connect.
Be honest now, or do you want us to do it the hard way?
The Auror threatened, his face dark. The other Auror was even more impatient. He waved his wand and a black beam of light hit Peter's thigh.
Ola.
Peter let out a shrill cry of pain. His face turned purple and he rolled on the ground, begging for mercy. However, no matter how much the two Aurors tortured him, Peter remained ignorant and they began to believe him.
Peter Pettigrew must have known something important about you-know-who or the Death Eaters, for someone to come and rescue him.
One of the Aurors said, after a moment of silence.
It's very likely that he realized that he couldn't save Peter, so he cast the memory charm to make Peter forget everything.
Another Auror nodded in agreement. They looked as though they had just swallowed a fly. They knew how important Peter was to them. The higher-ups had repeatedly warned them to be extra careful, but they did not expect something to go wrong in just a few hours. It was all that damned Daily Prophet's fault. If they hadn't spread the word about Peter, the Death Eaters wouldn't have known he was at Hogwarts so quickly.
Stay here with Peter, I'm going to report.
After some discussion, the two Aurors decided to report the incident to the higher-ups and request more manpower, as well as some professionals to see if Peter was really under the memory charm. Ivan, who was floating around disguised as a Dementor, heard their conclusions and frowned. If Peter had indeed lost his memory, it could have caused a lot of trouble later in the sentence. Ivan had not expected things to go this far. He had accidentally knocked the man unconscious. However, Peter's dark mark should serve as evidence, and the ministry had finished taking his statement. Ivan only hoped that the hearing would go well. While she was thinking, Ivan tried to fool the Dementors into believing that he was hiding in the shadows, fighting for the greater good of his tribe, and then escaping as quickly as possible. At the same time, in the Gryffindor lounge, the trio who had just gotten into trouble were hiding in a corner and discussing what had happened.
It's a good thing the Dementors didn't chase us all the way, or we'd have been caught.
Harry thought back to the thrill of being chased by Dementors, his face pale.
So you should have listened to me and not gone anywhere.
Hermione exclaimed, glaring at Harry. Although she was the one who guessed where Sirius was being held, she did not put Harry and Ron at risk, and would not have gone along if she had not been unable to stop him. Harry pursed his lips and did not reply. How could he trust Sirius to be held there with so many Dementors gathered around the observatory?
Oh no, I lost my wand. If Mom knew about this, she'd beat me to death.
How about I buy you a wand?
Harry asked sheepishly, scratching his head. Harry felt bad about losing Ron's wand when he was the one who suggested Sirius's plan.
It's not about buying a wand, Harry. Ron's wand was picked up by a Dementor, and if the Dementor had given it to the Aurors, they would have found out where we were.
Hermione raged.
What should we do?
Harry asked anxiously, having been reminded of this by Hermione. Ron was even more devastated, as it was his wand that had fallen, and he wondered if he would end up in Azkaban. Just as the three of them were troubled, a helpless voice sounded behind them.
What are you going to do? Next time, learn a lesson. I warned you not to see Sirius for a while.
Alarmed, Harry and the others turned to find Ivan standing behind them.
Ivan, did you hear everything? And when did you get behind us?
Harry looked embarrassed. He had promised Ivan that he would not go to Sirius, and now he had broken his promise. Ivan shook his head, avoiding Harry's question, then turned to Ron and threw his wand at him.
I can only blame your lack of vigilance. If I were your enemy, you'd be dead by now. No, Ron's your wand.
Ron scrambled to catch it, and when he saw that it really was the wand he had dropped earlier, he looked at Ivan excitedly.
Oh my God, you got it back. Thank you so much. You're the one who saved my life.
Ron cried as he kissed the wand, feeling alive again.
Ivan, how did you find this wand? I thought a Dementor picked it up.
Harry asked curiously.
I picked it up near the observatory. Maybe the Dementor had enough fun.
Ivan explained.
So you were on the observatory too. And when Peter tried to reveal Professor Lupin's identity, he started yelling like crazy because you'd done something to him.
Chapter 447, The Return of Dumbledore. Harry and Ron also realized this and turned to look at Ivan in bewilderment. They had not been aware of Ivan's presence at the observatory.
Ivan, how on earth did you do that?
Hermione asked Ivan curiously.
It only takes a few special spells to do it. Those Dementors aren't very smart, so it's not that difficult to fool them.
Ivan said vaguely, intending to fool them.
Right, Harry, behave yourselves and don't go looking for Sirius again. I may have covered for you this time, but the Aurors haven't given up looking for the man who sneaked into the observatory.
Harry and the others nodded quickly. Despite their many questions, they did not dare to probe further due to their guilty conscience. Hermione threw the books she was carrying on the table and clapped her hands.
Now that that's settled, it's time to get down to business.
Ivan looked at the thick books on the table and was speechless. The Trials of Modern Major Cases, How to Crush Your Opponent in Court, the Law Revised in 1983, Witchcraft, Law, the Defender's Self-Cultivation.
I'm just going to testify in court. I don't think I have to read all these books, do I?
Harry looked at the thickness of the books and felt an inexplicable urge to run away.
But do you know how to be a proper witness?
Hermione asked, glaring at him as she opened the book on superb defense techniques and flicked through the pages, pointing out the contents.
I've seen the defense of over 100 major cases, and I'm willing to bet that Peter's advocate will go out of his way to make things difficult for you in court. He'll pick out the flaws in your defense and even try to trick you into drawing the wrong conclusion. That's why you have to be prepared before a proper hearing. Even a slight increase in the odds would be good.
Hermione added.
But who's going to find a defender for Peter Pettigrew?
Ron scoffed. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Hermione rebuked him.
Peter's mother is still alive. When I found out in the Wizarding Archives that Peter had disappeared, the Ministry awarded him a first-class Order of Merlin which Peter's mother received. And even if no one would hire an advocate for Peter, the court would find one for him.
Harry looked at the books stacked on the table with a grimace. He had never been interested in reading, let alone reading such boring extracurricular books. In order to help Sirius, Harry patiently picked up one of the books and flipped through it. Ivan glanced at the thickness of the books on the table and mourned for Harry for a second, thinking that he would be busy for a few days.
What is it, Hermione?
Yvonne asked curiously.
If I'm not mistaken, Ivan, you're an important witness to Peter Pettigrew's capture.
Hermione said confidently as she thrust the book on the revision of British wizarding laws into Ivan's hands.
Wait.
Yvonne's mouth twitched. She had not expected Hermione to turn on her. He had too much on his plate lately to be in the mood to learn wizarding laws and regulations, and Ivan didn't think he'd be stumped by his opponent's advocate.
Then do you know how the court works and exactly how many crimes Peter committed?
Hermione demanded. Ivan opened his mouth to reply, but he knew next to nothing about Western judicial processes, let alone those of the wizarding world.
Fine, I'll read it.
Ivan finally sighed and resigned himself to reading the book. He suddenly remembered that, with Dumbledore away, Sirius's advocate might have to be found himself, and it never hurt to know the rules. Hermione sat next to Yvonne and kindly explained the legal provisions of the case to her, noting the necessary details. Apparently, the little witch had already finished reading the entire book.
A cockroach pile.
Ivan deftly recited the password to enter the headmaster's office, and the heavy guardian statue slowly rotated to give way to the entrance. Yvonne stepped into it as she always did, and then her face hardened and she stopped. There was a pile of junk on the central office, and to his surprise, Dumbledore, who had been missing for a long time, was sitting in a chair, reading a letter. Fawkes, a phoenix with golden red feathers, perched affectionately on his shoulder, occasionally making low, singing noises as if to say something.
Professor Dumbledore.
Ivan asked tentatively, unsure if the old man in front of him was really Professor Dumbledore. But presumably true, as Fawkes had never been quite so affectionate with him.
It's me, Hales.
Chapter 448, Dumbledore, what? I'm running for Minister for Magic.
You're finally back.
Ivan breathed a slow sigh of relief. In Dumbledore's absence, he was terrified every day that something would go wrong.
It seems that many things have happened in my absence, and although I have been able to learn some things from the Daily Prophet, I'm afraid they are not quite accurate enough.
Dumbledore said meaningfully, glancing at the letters and papers on the table. Not knowing exactly how much Dumbledore knew, Ivan started at the beginning.
Professor, here's the thing.
Ivan gave a half-hearted account of his discovery of Peter's identity, as well as the events of recent times and how he had dealt with them. Dumbledore applauded when he learned that Ivan had been able to identify Peter with only a name from the Marauder's map and knowledge of Animagus Transfiguration.
What a brilliant deduction, Hales. Minerva would be so proud of you if she found out you were using her transfiguration knowledge. Severus was right, you are a genius.
Dumbledore exclaimed, looking at Ivan with great emotion. It had been many years since he had met such a talented young wizard. Among his students, Tom was the only one who could compete. No.
Professor, you're not going to believe this.
What? I'm running for Minister for Magic. Dumbfounded, Dumbledore looked at Ivan with an odd expression. He couldn't understand what Ivan had said to him to cause such a misunderstanding. No wonder he had seen the Daily Prophet report on the Ministry's shady dealings, such as the Ministry's mismanagement of Dementors, the frequent rioting of Dementors, the alleged corruption of high-ranking officials, and so on.
Is that so?
Dumbledore looked surprised at Ivan's complaint and pushed a letter across the table to him before continuing.
I would have thought you'd be comfortable with this sort of life. After all, I can't remember ever sending a nomination letter to the Order of Merlin.
Ivan glanced at the letters on the table, his expression unchanging, and promptly passed the buck to Fudge. How could an impostor like him refuse Minister Fudge's kindness? Dumbledore was very suspicious, and did not think Fudge would be so kind, especially as Ivan had been making life difficult for Minister for Magic lately. However, the Merlin did mention Fudge's name in their reply, which was what puzzled him the most.
Professor Dumbledore, has the Order of Merlin agreed to the nomination?
Ivan asked cautiously, as this was a matter of legend.
There is no conclusion yet, and they will not consider issuing it until the trial is over and Peter Pettigrew is convicted.
Chapter 449, Nick Flamel's Letter and 6 Horcruxes. Ivan was disappointed to learn that the Order of Merlin was still considering a nomination. However, since he did not refuse, it meant that there was still hope. He reckoned that when the dust settled on Peter Pettigrew, he would receive his Order of Merlin. While Ivan was thinking about this, he was surprised to see Dumbledore handing him another letter. Yvonne was baffled. Had she been caught out about something else? Or some bastard writing to complain about him? Several possibilities flashed through Ivan's mind. He picked up the envelope and read its contents.
Nick Flamel.
Yvonne read the gold lettering on the end of the envelope, then looked up at Dumbledore in surprise. He understood who Nick Flamel was, of course, but it was for this reason that he found it hard to believe. He had no dealings with this world-famous alchemist, so why would he send him a letter?
Remember the time turner you broke?
Dumbledore asked. Yvonne nodded, vaguely reminded of her earlier suspicions, and confirmed them.
Mr. Nick Flamel fixed it.
Yes, I went to my old friend Nick specifically to ask him for help.
Dumbledore nodded, then smiled and continued. He was surprised for a moment that you could damage the time turner to this extent.
So he and I talked a great deal about you, and when I learned that you were also gifted in the field of alchemy, my old friend wished to meet you.
Dumbledore's blue eyes under his half-moon spectacles stared at Ivan, waiting for his reply.
Of course, I'd be honored.
Ivan was overjoyed and agreed without hesitation. He had been worried that his alchemy had hit a bottleneck and that he would not be able to progress without someone to teach him, and now Nick Flamel wanted to see him.
When can we see my teacher?
Yvonne asked quickly. The speed with which Ivan changed his mind surprised Dumbledore, as he had not yet mentioned that Nick intended to take him on as a disciple.
Not just yet, Hulse. You'll have to finish your education for a while, so wait until the summer holidays, and we'll be gone quite a while, so you'll have to convince your mother and be prepared.
Dumbledore said grimly. Ivan calmed down. Although he felt that his third-year classes were optional at his current level of magic, considering his GPA, he decided to be patient and wait until the summer holidays. Dumbledore took in Ivan's reaction and nodded to himself. He had expected Ivan to be more anxious, but the boy was more patient than he had expected.
Anyway, the rest is in this letter from Nick. If there's nothing else, you can go back.
Dumbledore said, waving his hand.
I'll leave you to it, Professor.
Ivan placed the Elder Wand on the table and, after a moment's thought, took out the time turner. This time turner belongs to the Ministry of Magic, after all, and there is no need for him to force Dumbledore's hand.
Teacher.
In a deliberately tentative manner, but Dumbledore had not objected, indicating that Nick Flamel wanted to take him on as a student. With that in mind, Ivan headed out of the headmaster's office. Dumbledore glanced at Ivan's things on the table and watched him disappear into the headmaster's office.
The third.
Dumbledore whispered, holding out his other hand, which had been hidden in his sleeve. The strange thing was that the palm was charred black and gave off a faint black aura. On the thumb was a ring inlaid with a black gem. Dumbledore reached out and removed the ring, placing it beside the diadem and staring at the three objects in silence. Ever since Ivan destroyed the diary and diadem in his first year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, he had discovered the secret to Lord Voldemort's immortality, the creation of Horcruxes. Since there were two of them, there could be a third, fourth, or even more. This realization caused a chill to run down Dumbledore's spine. Dividing a complete soul was not an easy task, and so the creation of a Horcrux was extremely wicked, requiring the use of murder and other nefarious means to shatter one's own soul and separate a portion of the soul from the body, sealing it within the Horcrux. Fully divided souls became extremely unstable, and creating multiple Horcruxes required not only the pain of multiple split souls, but also the emotional impact on the maker. It could be said that Lord Voldemort was driven to madness to escape death. Dumbledore muttered this to himself in a mixture of pity and emotion, although the number of Horcruxes meant that Voldemort would be difficult to kill. After all, as long as there was a Horcrux, Tom would be able to survive no matter what. Fortunately, the two Horcruxes chosen by Voldemort gave him some hints, which made his search for the remaining Horcruxes much easier. The Ravenclaw diadem was one of the relics of the Big Four, and the diary was used to record Tom's life as a student. Since Tom chose these two items as Horcruxes, it is likely that other Horcruxes were not chosen at random, but were more valuable or commemorative. Aside from the Sword of Gryffindor, Dumbledore suspects that several other artifacts were most likely used as Horcruxes. He did not forget that Tom had returned to Hogwarts to apply for the position of defense against the dark arts professor, and he was surprised to learn that Tom was probably after the Sword of Gryffindor in order to store the Ravenclaw crown.
If that were the case, there would be at least 5 Horcruxes.
Dumbledore murmured to himself, his eyes closed in thought. Dumbledore's eyes flew open, as if he had just thought of something, and they shone with a strange light.
No, perhaps 6.
Chapter 450, The Three Deathly Hallows, the Resurrection Stone. Dumbledore's brow furrowed at the possibility, and he tapped his long index finger on the desk with a dull noise. Although he did not want to believe it, his rational mind told him that Harry was most likely one of them. Dumbledore sighed slowly, and his face seemed to age for a moment. The magic in his body dissipated unconsciously, and the space around him became somewhat oppressive.
It's all right, Fox.
Dumbledore soothed the golden-red phoenix with his good hand. He had expected this to happen. The magic that Voldemort placed on the Horcrux was extraordinary and could not be removed by conventional means.
Inform Severus and bring him to me, Fox.
Dumbledore said suddenly, his only hope now being to start with the potion and see if he could find a solution. The golden-red phoenix nodded and disappeared from the headmaster's office in a flash of flame. Not long after, an explosion occurred in the empty space, and the flames rapidly expanded into a humanoid shape. As the flames died down, a black-robed Snape appeared in the headmaster's office. To Dumbledore's surprise, Snape was still in the process of brewing the potion, and there were scratches on his clothes. Snape's face was dark as he threw the remnants of the potion on the table and asked unhappily.
Why did you send this red-furred bird to me in such a hurry?
He was brewing a very precious potion in the basement when this phoenix suddenly appeared in front of him. Without asking, it grabbed his clothes and forcefully teleported him over. Dumbledore did not reply, but merely raised his blackened palm.
Are you hurt?
Snape's pupils contracted.
Yes, as you can see.
Dumbledore nodded. Ignoring the earlier incident, Snape grabbed Dumbledore's arm and examined it closely.
How are your injuries?
Dumbledore asked.
It's very difficult. It's an extremely special type of dark magic. It can erode your magic, make it stronger, and is very difficult to eradicate.
Snape examined the potion for a while, then slowly shook his head.
It's enough.
Dumbledore withdrew his hand, somewhat better than he had intended.
Anyway, thank you, Severus.
Snape watched him with concern as he turned and left. Fawkes thought he was too slow and gave him a lift. When Snape returned about half an hour later, he was holding a test cup filled with a rich golden liquid.
Do I need to drink this?
Dumbledore asked, taking the potion from Snape and drinking it in one gulp. When the thick golden liquid entered his mouth, it turned into a warm current that spread throughout his body.
Thank you, your potion is very useful, Severus. I feel much better.
Said Dumbledore appreciatively, having felt some of his body's condition.
That's just your imagination.
Snape's face was ice cold, and he had no intention of comforting the centenarian.
I'm only temporarily suppressing the effects of this black magic. It will only get stronger day by day. After about a year, it will act up again. There will be nothing we can do to restrain it.
Dumbledore took Snape's warning to heart but did not react. He was staring at the charred palm, examining it as if it were something interesting. Dumbledore's indifferent attitude discouraged Snape, and he hesitated for a moment before asking.
How exactly did you get hit?
He simply could not imagine anyone in the wizarding world today capable of injuring Dumbledore and leaving such powerful dark magic on his hands. Dumbledore pointed directly at the items on the table. Snape looked down and saw the diary, diadem, and ring on his desk. He was familiar with the diadem and diadem, two Horcruxes destroyed by Ivan Hal's last term, and the extra ring was easy to guess.
This ring is the Dark Lord's third Horcrux. Is that what hurt you?
Snape could tell at a glance that the ring had been imbued with powerful dark magic, presumably a trigger.
You should be able to see that it's bewitched, so why touch it?
Snape demanded, glaring at Dumbledore.
This Horcrux was hidden by Tom in the Gaunt family home. It was enchanted with an ancient charm that aroused the interest of anyone who found it and triggered it.
Dumbledore exclaimed. Tom had surprised him. The more obsessed a person is, the more likely they will fall for it.
A 12-year-old child could destroy two Horcruxes unscathed, and yet you perished with this ring. It seems that even the greatest white wizard in the wizarding world is no better than this.
Chapter 451, Master of Death.
Don't say that, Severus. You should be more lenient with an elderly man. I've been known to make the occasional mistake.
Dumbledore did not elaborate on the matter of the Three Hallows. Snape sneered at him, then remembered something and his expression changed. He stared at the old man suspiciously.
No, your injuries were inflicted several days ago, otherwise they would not have worsened to this extent, but I saw you just 2 days ago.
Snape's eyes narrowed as he questioned her.
I was injured and could not see the others.
Dumbledore explained vaguely, touching the golden ring and staring at the burned holes and cracks. It took him a long time and countless attempts to find a way to destroy the Horcrux, the fire-bidding charm. Having not used dark magic for decades, he had almost forgotten how to use it.
So you really weren't the one I met with 2 days ago?
Snape asked, looking annoyed. Dumbledore did not say who it was, but Snape was able to sort through the possible candidates in his mind, and when combined with their recent strange behavior, he was able to arrive at a conclusion.
It was Ivan Hal's, the little devil. He used Polyjuice Potion to disguise himself as you at your behest.
Snape asked confidently. Praising himself and giving Gryffindor a few hundred points seemed like something Ivan Hal's would do. Snape's mouth twitched as he remembered how he had complained to her 2 days ago.
Why did something happen?
Dumbledore asked, raising his eyebrows when he noticed Snape looking upset. Snape was not prepared to talk about his dark past, but instead changed the subject by questioning Dumbledore's decision to assign a child who had not yet graduated to the duties of acting as the headmistress.
But he managed to fool Minister for Magic Fudge and us professors. It seems that child was more suited to the position of headmaster than you.
Snape said sarcastically. Ignoring Snape's snide comment, Dumbledore seemed quite pleased with himself.
Do you think so, Severus? It just goes to show you I chose the right person. I thought you or Minerva would be the one to represent us, but I thought the children might prefer a different headmaster.
Despite his words, Dumbledore knew full well that neither McGonagall nor Snape was fit to represent him. McGonagall was powerful and experienced, but she tended to be conservative and inflexible, unlike Yvonne, who was unconventional and completely indifferent to rules. Snape, on the other hand, had a grudge against Sirius and was not the right person for the job.
The Elder Wand.
Dumbledore whispers the names of the 3 Deathly Hallows, wondering what mystery they hold.
The possession of all means that 3 objects must be assembled.
Dumbledore stares at the picture, and a thought occurs to him that perhaps the combination of the 3 Deathly Hallows might cause something magical to happen.
Jesus Christ, why am I spending so much time learning about the British international law and the Muggle Protection Act? It has nothing to do with this case.
Harry complained loudly. However, he was quickly silenced by Hermione, who glared at him and rebuked him.
How could it not be? Open the book and read it carefully. Peter Pettigrew killed 13 Muggles right under the jurisdiction of the Muggle Protection Act.
Don't say that, Severus. You should be more lenient with an elderly man. I've been known to make the occasional mistake.
In addition, Peter was a Death Eater and was convicted of 7 other war crimes.
Hermione then looked at Harry in surprise.
As I recall, you've been reading them for almost an hour and you still haven't memorized them.
Chapter 452, Harry, tell me the truth, did you secretly tutor me behind my back?
These laurelated books are so tedious. How long have I been reading them?
Harry pursed his lips, his eyes growing dizzy with the details.
But you've been reading for an hour.
Hermione's voice was rising, and she thought Harry must have been wasting his time by not reading properly.
Don't you read the papers? Sirius's trial is tomorrow, you only have one night.
Hermione reminded her. Harry could only cover his face with his book and shiver at Hermione's rebuke, knowing that his time was limited. However, Peter Pettigrew had at least 20 laws, and due to the complexity of the add-ons, it took him an hour to grasp the general meaning of each.
How could anyone possibly recite these terms in 15 minutes?
Harry muttered. Seeing that Harry was not convinced, Hermione turned to Ivan. Ivan, who was reading the book, looked up. He had, of course, heard Hermione talking to Harry and was quickly recounting Peter Pettigrew's various crimes.
Clause 3, Clause 27 of the Muggle Protection Act states that any wizard should refrain from performing magic in public in the Muggle world.
See, I was right, wasn't I?
Hermione said to Harry when Ivan had finished. Harry was devastated.
What are we doing up so early?
Yvonne asked, glancing at the dawn sky, wanting nothing more than to get back to bed.
It's getting late. The court session starts in 3 hours.
Harry's face had changed from its previous night's side to one full of energy and nerves.
Perhaps we'll have to get ready and bring something. And where is the courtroom? Have you been there?
Flustered, Harry searched under his bed for the cloak of invisibility, wondering if he should put it on. If things went badly and Sirius's case failed, he might be able to get out of this alive.
Don't worry, we won't have to bring anything. We'll be back by evening at the latest. And Professor Dumbledore is the chief wizard of the Wisengamot Tribunal, so we're going to win.
Ivan said reassuringly. The Wisengamot is the name of the highest court in the wizarding world. Due to the small number of wizards and witches in the wizarding world, courts sometimes go months without a case, so there are no separate courts, and the entire trial takes place in the ministry's courtroom. The proceedings were brief, taking the form of an interrogator asking a question, the clerk taking notes, and the verdict by a show of hands. Ivan was filling Harry in on what he had read in the books as they walked towards the Great Hall. It was not yet 6 o'clock and the Great Hall was empty, but the hardworking house elves were on hand to serve them a hearty breakfast. While Ivan leisurely enjoyed the food, Harry ate his breakfast while glancing at the Muggle Protection Act, thinking that he had a few more important points to remember, and that it was not too late to start sharpening his skills.
Professor Dumbledore, will you be the praetor?
Ivan asked curiously. As Dumbledore was nominally the highest-ranking official in the Wisengamot, it is likely that he presided over this trial. Harry looked expectantly at Dumbledore, waiting for his reply.
No, unfortunately.
Dumbledore shook his head as the two men stared at him. He had only returned yesterday and did not have enough time to influence the other members of the Wisengamot to make a decision, so the presiding judge was most likely from the ministry. Harry's expression turned disappointed.
Don't worry, we have very strong evidence of Sirius's innocence.
Dumbledore reassured them, then stressed the rules of the court and suggested that Hermione and Ron tag along. They were both surprised to learn this.
But I haven't done anything to prepare for it.
Hermione was flustered, as this was not part of her plan.
You know so much more than we do. What need is there for preparation?
Yvonne complained, reading more than she or Harry Hermione. Ivan even suspected that Miss Know-It-All could probably recite all the laws and regulations of the wizarding world.
What about Ron? He doesn't know anything yet.
Chapter 453, How Did I Become the King of Knockturn Alley? Dumbledore paid no attention to Ron's confusion. Ron only had to admit this to the court because he was Scabbers' master.
Professor Dumbledore, how are we going to get to the courtroom? By carriage, it seems very late.
Harry said anxiously, noticing the clock on the Great Hall's wall.
No, you don't have to go to all that trouble.
Dumbledore held out his left hand to hold Harry's. Harry nodded and grabbed Ron, then Ivan and Hermione. The five formed a circle, and Hermione tried to pull Dumbledore's other hand to form a closed loop, but he did not respond.
Where's Sirius? Isn't he with us?
Harry asked, looking around for Sirius.
He and Peter have been taken to the Ministry of Magic by Aurors, and will not be joining us.
Dumbledore began to explain, then looked out of the window as a phoenix swooped in and perched on his shoulder. There was a burst of singing, and golden red flames erupted from Fawkes's body, quickly spreading to each of them, turning them into torches. Hermione was shocked and clutched Ivan's hand tightly, but soon realized that the flames were harmless and warm to the touch. Fawkes's voice rose to a crescendo, and the flames surrounding him began to swell. Hermione felt the world spin, and when she came to, she was in an abandoned street.
This is London.
Hermione exclaimed, looking around at the tall buildings.
Right, because the Ministry of Magic is based in London. That's why we're here.
Ron said, showing off what little he knew. His father worked at the ministry, and although Ron never visited, he knew a thing or two about it.
Of course I do. The Ministry of Magic is mentioned in many of the books, and the entrance is disguised as a telephone booth where an outsider would have to apply to enter.
Hermione went on, stating that the location of the Ministry of Magic was common knowledge in the wizarding world. Harry looked confused. Was this common sense? Why didn't he know? Ron was left speechless by Hermione's retort, but he was not about to admit defeat.
Let's stop for a moment, children. As you know, we don't have a lot of time, and you'd better walk and talk.
Dumbledore was forced to interrupt them as he considered the court hearing. Fawkes, on the other hand, looked tired and was resting with his eyes closed in disgust. It was obviously difficult to carry 5 people at once. Hermione stopped arguing with Ron, then noticed that she was still holding Ivan's hand and pulled back. Hermione then checked Ivan's expression at random and was relieved when he didn't seem to notice, and then felt angry.
Ivan, have you been here before?
Hermione noticed that Ivan did not look surprised, as if he was familiar with the area.
A year or so ago, because of something.
Yvonne replied shortly.
It's because of the wolfsbane potion, isn't it? You must have come here to register a patent.
Hermione thought for a moment, then guessed why Ivan was there. Ivan nodded. The young witch's guess was not far off.
Please let him go.
I'm sure he's innocent. You can't convict him for a mark.
Ivan was very curious and glanced inside as he approached. The interior of the waiting room was large and full of people, most of whom were aurors and a few wizards who were dressed like Dumbledore, presumably members of the Wisengamot trials. Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew are also here.
Serious?
Chapter 454, Peter's Advocate. There was an elderly witch in her 60s or 70s standing as far as Ivan could see, wearing ragged, worn-out robes. She was quite short, with a hunched back and tear-streaked eyes. She was pleading with a member of the Wisengamot Inquisitorial Squad, clutching a shiny golden object in her hand. Perhaps sensing Ivan's gaze on her, the old witch turned to face him. When she saw who he was, she glared at him with hatred. Yvonne found this odd, as she did not know him. However, the old witch's face turned red, and she angrily swung her walking stick at him. Luckily, the aura reacted in time and stopped her. However, the old witch refused to give up. She tried to break free, crying and cursing.
You liars, scum! My son is the glorious Merlin, hero of the resistance against you-know-who.
The member of the Wisengamot tribunal next to her waved her hand in annoyance, and the two aurors dragged her out.
Who is she, Professor? That's Mrs. Peter, the mother of Pettigrew.
Dumbledore replied with a slow sigh. Hermione and the others fell silent as they watched the old witch being dragged out of the waiting room. Yvonne shook her head to herself. No wonder he was so excited. Any mother would be overjoyed to learn that her long-dead child was still alive. However, the aurors who came to inform them would soon shatter their illusions. This is because Pettigrew is no longer a hero who died gloriously for his friends, but a thug who betrayed his friends, defected to the Dark Lord, and murdered many muggles. Now facing more than 20 charges, it is highly likely that he will be executed immediately after this trial.
You should be aware that I have learned from a friend of mine in the Wisengamot that Madame Peter is to be the defender of Pettigrew. But
Harry gasped.
Age is not an issue.
Dumbledore quipped.
I didn't mean anything by it, Professor.
Harry tried to explain. Dumbledore smiled, indicating that he did not mind, but he quickly composed himself and continued.
In short, you'd better not look down on her because of her age. Madame Peter is not to be trifled with. You should know that Pettigrew's achievements were far from worth a first-class Order of Merlin.
Dumbledore was so tactful that Harry could not understand a word he was saying. Ivan, however, understood what Dumbledore was trying to say. In other words, the Order of Merlin did not intend to award Peter Pettigrew with the Order of Merlin. It was likely that the mother of Pettigrew used her son's death as an excuse to claim the Order of Merlin. Yvonne was left speechless at the thought. He knew better than anyone how difficult it was to obtain a first-class Order of Merlin. He had done so much for the Order of Merlin that they would only consider him if both Dumbledore and Minister for Magic Fudge nominated him. At that time, Pettigrew had at most a reputation for courageously dying to avenge his friends and nothing to show for it. During the Wizarding War, there were many casualties, such as Pettigrew, and it was not easy for his mother to win him the highest honor in the wizarding world. After all, Peter Pettigrew was not born into a pureblood family and presumably had little influence in the wizarding community. Dumbledore was troubled by the memory, as he was the one who nominated Peter Pettigrew for the Order of Merlin. For one thing, Peter Pettigrew was a member of the Order of the Phoenix. This old woman cried, threw tantrums, and tried to hang herself to win glory for her dead child, and tortured him for a whole month. Given that he had just lost his only son, Dumbledore had no choice but to agree to the nomination, as he had to console him instead of making nasty comments. He thought it was just a formality, but it actually passed the application.
The hearing is about to begin. Don't be too nervous. Wait here until you're summoned, and when you're asked a question, just be honest.
With that, Dumbledore left with the aurors. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who were left behind, were very nervous, discussing strategies in low voices and even mimicking answering each other's questions.
Ivan, aren't you nervous?
Hermione looked at him strangely. Ivan shook his head. It was his first time in a wizarding court, but the odds were in his favor. He was not the one on trial, so there was nothing to be alarmed about. Harry and Ron, on the other hand, were frantically imagining the possible difficulties they would face in the courtroom and anxiously asking Ivan how to deal with them.
Didn't Professor Dumbledore tell you? Just tell the truth. Just make sure you don't get led astray.
Ivan said in exasperation. He believed that Harry and the others were so bad at telling lies that they could be seen through on the spot, in which case the truth would be discredited. This is probably why Dumbledore insists that they speak the truth. As Harry and the others chatted, the door to the waiting room opened and a solemn-looking Auror stood there, speaking to Ivan.
Mr. Ivan Hars, the advocate Albus Percival Wulfric Dumbledore, requests your testimony.
Ivan nodded, stood, and followed the Auror to the door of the courtroom. The Auror pulled the door open and spoke expressionlessly. Go in, also, for the safety of the venue, you cannot bring your wand. Chapter 455, Transforming into a Peter Pettigrew. Ivan frowned at this rule, unsure if the other party was deliberately making things difficult for him. After a moment's hesitation, Ivan decided to hand over his wand, as he could still fight without it. Furthermore, Dumbledore was also present, so the other party would not dare to act recklessly. The Auror retrieved his wand and led the way. Ivan strode inside, the noise of the crowd reaching his ears, and found an enclosed space. The walls are made of dark stone, and the light is dim, except for the magical fires that stand on either side, lighting the way.
I believe I have made my point, Inquisitor.
Dumbledore's voice was loud and clear, echoing throughout the sealed courtroom.
Ah, yes,
Said the white-robed Inquisitor, standing on the dais and staring at Dumbledore for a moment before turning to Ivan, who had just reached the platform.
Mr. Ivan Hals, just now Black's advocate said that you were the one who discovered Peter's true identity. Is that correct?
Right.
Yvonne said, nodding.
Please repeat what you saw.
The presiding judge demanded, his eyes fixed on Ivan.
It starts with a name I found on the Marauders map a year ago.
Said Ivan, recounting the story he had told several times. Though riddled with falsehoods, Ivan was experienced enough to keep a straight face, and even to have his expression fluctuate depending on the situation. As soon as Ivan finished speaking, several members of the alchemical staff stepped forward to inspect the Marauders map, which Ivan claimed was enchanted to show the names of people in an area.
Very good.
Hearing the response from the staff, the Inquisitor turned her attention from Ivan to Pettigrew, who was now bound to his seat.
So what else did Mr. Peter have to say?
Pettigrew's expression was blank, and his face was changing constantly. He naturally understood what Ivan had said, and his mind was filled with scattered memories, but none of them connected, which made him unable to retort. At that moment, the old witch behind him slammed her walking stick down and roared.
Counter.
Madame Peter looked around at the Wisengamot committee members sitting on either side of her.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Madame Peter looked at Ivan with hatred, as if she wanted to eat him alive. The committee members discussed the matter among themselves, finding Mrs. Peter's words reasonable. A second-year student could not possibly know so much about animagus transfiguration, let alone break it.
Ma'am, I must remind you that Mr. Hales is very good at transfiguration. He was as good as any adult wizard in his second year.
Dumbledore's high-pitched voice drowned out the discussion and successfully drew the attention of the committee members.
Is that so? Prove it.
The presiding judge eyed Ivan suspiciously, not trusting Dumbledore's words.
Just give me a wand, I'll show you.
Ivan was undaunted. Transfiguration was his speciality. The Inquisitor shot a look at the Auror, who knowingly returned the wand to Ivan. For a moment, all eyes were on Ivan as the committee members whispered among themselves. Ivan took the wand and tapped a nearby torch. The ghostly blue flames leapt up and disappeared with a bang, and the iron base beneath it melted rapidly, changing shape like fluid. In just a few moments, the fluid began to solidify. Another dwarf, tied to a chair, appeared in front of them with a confused look on his face just like Peter's. He opened his mouth to speak, but an unintelligible roar escaped his lips. Ivan put away his wand and looked at the dwarf and shook his head. It was so hard to conjure a living person. Because each individual had its own characteristics, they were easy to distinguish, unlike the shapeshifters, who only needed to be roughly the same. More importantly, the shapeshifted living person had too little intelligence, like a retard, so Ivan considered this attempt a failure.
What a wonderful transfiguration.
The discussion grew louder and louder, and the Wisengamot wizards swept their questioning gazes away. Several wizards even stood up in excitement and would have gone to the platform to get a closer look if Aurors hadn't stopped them. Dumbledore was equally amazed by Ivan's improvement in transfiguration in such a short period of time, and lamented that, at this rate, Ivan would surpass him in a few years.
I think this should be enough to answer your doubts.
Ivan didn't care about the crowd's praise. He casually waved his wand to change the torch back to its original form, then looked at Peter's mother and continued.
Also, as far as I know, your child Pettigrew completed the transfiguration of his animagus before he even graduated, so please trust him more next time and doubt him less.
Before the old witch could reply, Sirius scoffed.
That's because James and I helped him. Otherwise, Peter would never have had the guts to do it.
Chapter 456. Ivan, isn't it just acting miserable? Who's afraid of who? Ivan shot Sirius a quick look. This was no time to sulk. Sirius pursed his lips and said nothing.
How dare you insult my son?
Mrs. Peter was furious and waved her walking stick in an attempt to hit Sirius. However, the walking stick was caught in midair, and Dumbledore stared at the old witch with anger. Madame Peter's anger was doused, and she trembled as she tried to pull her walking stick away from Dumbledore.
Silence, stop. This is a courtroom, not a place to cause trouble.
The presiding judge slammed the table angrily. Dumbledore let go, and the walking stick fell to the floor. Madame Peter trembled slightly as she squatted down to pick up her walking stick. She bent her body and looked at the presiding judge on the stage.
Your Honor, please forgive my rudeness. As a mother, I have been separated from my child for more than 10 years. Today, I finally managed to see him again.
In the end, Mrs. Peter burst into tears, telling the story of how her only child
died,
and how she was left all alone in the wizarding world.
Mrs. Peter, you are mistaken. Your child, Peter Pettigrew, was a Death Eater. He shamefully revealed the Potter family's hiding place to you-know-who, failing his best friend, who was willing to trust him with his life, and nearly destroying the entire wizarding community.
Ivan's impassioned tone made the committee members, who had been sympathetic to the old witch, remember Peter's ugly deeds. Ivan, however, had no intention of stopping. He looked at everyone present and continued in a sharp voice.
Harry Potter saved the wizarding world, saved us all, and saved us from the tyranny of you-know-who. But such a hero should have had a happy family, loved his parents, and enjoyed the glory he deserved.
How dare you insult my son? Mrs. Peter was furious and waved her walking stick in an attempt to hit Sirius. However, the walking stick was caught in midair, and Dumbledore stared at the old witch with anger. Madame Peter's anger was doused, and she trembled as she tried to pull her walking stick away from Dumbledore. Silence, stop. This is a courtroom, not a place to cause trouble. The presiding judge slammed the table angrily. Dumbledore let go, and the walking stick fell to the floor. Madame Peter trembled slightly as she squatted down to pick up her walking stick. She bent her body and looked at the presiding judge on the stage. Your Honor, please forgive my rudeness. As a mother, I have been separated from my child for more than 10 years. Today, I finally managed to see him again.
How dare those muggles? It would be a great honor to adopt Harry Potter. How dare they?
God, I never knew Harry suffered so much as a child. I thought the ministry would have arranged the best place for him.
What was the ministry doing? Why didn't they care about Harry Potter for years?
The members of the committee seated on both sides of the table were furious and began to curse. They had long since forgotten about the slight grievances of Mrs. Peter's life, and were more notable for their discrimination against wizards and the unjust treatment of heroes. And there are no new generations of wizards to sit here. Every one of them has lived through the last wizarding war and experienced the horrors of you-know-who and the Death Eaters, and they are grateful to Harry for ending you-know-who. Many of the infected witches looked at Peter with disdain, and anger, but one witch with some sense stood up and questioned him.
Mr. Harles, can you guarantee that everything you just said is true? Yes, ma'am, Harry Potter is in the holding room and will be testifying, so you can ask him yourself.
Chapter 457, Peter is still a child, how can you treat him like this?
Silence.
Seeing that the conversation was getting out of hand, the presiding judge knocked on the table again, warning Ivan and Madame Peter to refrain from saying anything unrelated to the trial. However, many of the committee members ignored him, and there was a lot of private discussion, and no matter how the presiding judge knocked on the table, it did not help.
Mrs. Peter, do you have any other questions? If not, I'll have the next witness present.
The presiding judge only spoke with emphasis to drown out the noise.
Yes, of course.
Although she felt that Ivan was very troublesome, Madame Peter had no intention of admitting defeat.
All of us knew it was Black who betrayed Harry Potter's parents, not my child Pettigrew.
Mrs. Peter, I must interrupt. As I have explained to you before, Sirius and Pettigrew have secretly swapped identities as secret keepers.
Dumbledore interrupted in a low voice.
Who can prove it?
Mrs. Peter persisted.
You said that only Harry Potter's father, James Potter, Black, and my children, Pettigrew, knew about the switching of the secret keepers. The problem is that Mr. Potter is dead, and my children have lost their memories, so it's up to you to say what you want. It's not fair. It's not a matter of fairness, Mrs. Peter. The law is all about evidence. Isn't it clear enough that we found the dark mark on Pettigrew, but not on Sirius?
Dumbledore replied calmly. As Dumbledore spoke, an Auror stepped forward and pulled open Peter Pettigrew's sleeve, revealing the dark mark. Most of the committee members at the table had read about the dark mark, so they knew about it beforehand. However, they still felt uneasy when they saw it with their own eyes. Ivan secretly breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that the trial was almost over, as the dark mark was the most damning evidence of Pettigrew's guilt. However, to his surprise, Mrs. Peter did not seem to have any intention of giving up. Even when faced with such evidence, her expression did not change.
Enough, why would a real spy have a dark mark on him?
Silence, seeing that the conversation was getting out of hand, the presiding judge knocked on the table again, warning Ivan and Madame Peter to refrain from saying anything unrelated to the trial. However, many of the committee members ignored him, and there was a lot of private discussion, and no matter how the presiding judge knocked on the table, it did not help.
I heard it wasn't the Aurors who caught my son, but you, didn't it?
Mrs. Peter asked, glaring at them with hatred.
Please stop being unreasonable, Mrs. Peter.
Dumbledore said helplessly, then paused before continuing. After a ministry investigation, it was determined that Peter Pettigrew's memory was wiped by a Death Eater who was on the run, and that if I were to tamper with him, I would do so before I handed him over to the ministry.
The other thing you're wrong about is that no one can forge a dark mark, because it's Voldemort's own magic, and it's full of his magic, and it's very recognizable, and I don't think anyone would dare to do it since.
Dumbledore's casual remark caused the room to fall silent. All the wizards present, including the presiding judge, felt a chill in their hearts when they heard Dumbledore's news that the undulating earth spirits still existed. There were always rumors in the wizarding world that you-know-who did not actually die that night, but merely lost his power. Many people speculated that you-know-who was hiding in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to plot and return one day. However, the Ministry of Magic has been denying this rumor for years, insisting that you-know-who has been thoroughly defeated, and that all Death Eaters have been imprisoned in Azkaban, and that he will never return.
Sir Dumbledore, please do not make such jokes in court.
The presiding judge said dryly, his expression sour.
We all know it's not a joke, I'm just stating the facts.
Dumbledore replied flatly. Ivan silently watched the fearful expressions on everyone's faces, suddenly amused. How dare these men, so fearful of the powerless Lord Voldemort, shout against Dumbledore's words?
I know him all too well, he's too much of a coward and too kind to be a traitor.
Mrs. Peter sobbed as she hugged Pettigrew. Dumbledore, unmoved by Mrs. Peter's cries, retorted.
Don't change the subject, Mrs. Peter. Even amnesia does not offset one's mistakes.
Silence, seeing that the conversation was getting out of hand, the presiding judge knocked on the table again, warning Ivan and Madame Peter to refrain from saying anything unrelated to the trial. However, many of the committee members ignored him, and there was a lot of private discussion, and no matter how the presiding judge knocked on the table, it did not help.
I spoke to some Aurors, and they told me that a professional wizard had identified my child as having been hit with multiple memory charms in a short period of time. Perhaps my son learned something, and you forcibly tampered with his brain, turning him over to the Aurors, and then decided it wasn't safe enough, so you infiltrated the observatory and erased his memory.
At this point, Madame Peter turned to the presiding judge on the stage and spoke through gritted teeth.
Your Honor, I demand to inspect their wands. Use the flashback charm.
Chapter 458, Ivan, don't do this, what if it frightens you? Mrs. Peter's voice suddenly filled the courtroom. This was undoubtedly a very rude condition, and no wizard would want to be known to have cast any spells with his wand. However, under the regulations of the wizarding world, under certain circumstances, the Ministry of Magic would have the power to investigate a wizard's wand and override the use of a flashback charm.
May I, Sir Dumbledore?
The Inquisitor asked, narrowing his eyes.
And the brat, his wand too, he can also cast memory charms.
Mrs. Peter's voice was hoarse but firm. When Dumbledore did not reply, Ivan spoke without hesitation.
No, I refuse.
Why?
The Inquisitor looked at him suspiciously.
Unless it wasn't a Death Eater who infiltrated the observatory to purge my son's memory a few days ago, that's who.
Mrs. Peter's voice was high-pitched and thin with emotion. Yvonne ignored the old witch and explained to the presiding judge and the many committee members.
Ladies and gentlemen, my family, the Hales family, has some special magic that has been passed down for hundreds of years. I clearly remember that in the Wizarding Rights Protection Act, it was stated that heritage magic was classified and should be protected.
Do this, what if it frightens you? Mrs. Peter's voice suddenly filled the courtroom. This was undoubtedly a very rude condition, and no wizard would want to be known to have cast any spells with his wand. However, under the regulations of the wizarding world, under certain circumstances, the Ministry of Magic would have the power to investigate a wizard's wand and override the use of a flashback charm. May I, Sir Dumbledore? The Inquisitor asked, narrowing his eyes. And the brat, his wand too, he can also cast memory charms. Mrs. Peter's voice was hoarse but firm. When Dumbledore did not reply, Ivan spoke without hesitation. No, I refuse. Why? The Inquisitor looked at him suspiciously. Unless it wasn't a Death Eater who infiltrated the observatory to purge my son's memory a few days ago. That's who? Mrs. Peter's voice was high-pitched and thin with emotion. Yvonne ignored the old witch and explained to the presiding judge and the many committee members. Ladies and gentlemen, my family, the Hales family, has some special magic that has been passed down for hundreds of years. I clearly remember that in the Wizarding Rights Protection Act, it was stated that heritage magic was classified and should be protected. Also, I mentioned that I used the memory charm on Peter Pettigrew several times to keep his capture a secret. If you use the flashback charm to investigate, you will find traces of the memory charm in my wand, so this is pointless. Yvonne spoke with gusto, grateful that she had been coerced into learning so much about the law by Hermione. Otherwise, she would have been on the defensive. The flashback charm was a very special and unpopular investigative charm, which Ivan did not know in detail. However, it has been shown twice in the original timeline. The first was when Cedric Diggory's father cast a flashback pre-incantation on Harry's wand at the site of the World Cup to replay the spell. The second time was when Lord Voldemort revived to duel Harry and accidentally triggered the flashback charm because their wands had the same core. The wand in Voldemort's hand performed the same charm over and over again in the form of a flashback, and because of the use of the fatal curse, the images of the victims floated from the wand. Therefore, Ivan did not want his wand to be jinxed. After all, he had used some of the most lethal wands in the world, such as Thunderbolt Explosion and Shadowless Blade. If the dark wizards who had died at his hands were to float out of his wand at the same time, he would be in deep trouble. All present would immediately know that despite their young age, they had killed many people.
Excuses, I never knew the Hales had any so-called inherited magic, and as far as I know you are not part of the pureblood family.
Mrs. Peter retorted, growing more and more convinced that she was right. In the course of their debate, the presiding judge and the two judges discussed the matter for a while before giving a compromise answer.
How about this? We'll keep using the four-flip charm for 4 days, once you've checked out all the spells you've cast, and then judge how long you've been casting them by the intervals between the beams.
The presiding judge looked at Ivan as if he were asking a question, but there was an undeniable determination in his voice. According to Auror's report, Pettigrew had been attacked at the Hogwarts Observatory 3 days earlier, so it would only take a test of this period to determine if Ivan was the killer. The odds of using special magic in such a short period of time were slim, and it was the best compromise he could make.
Yes, of course, no problem. I said I just didn't want to expose my family's inherited magic. It just so happens that I haven't practiced those charms in the past few days.
Ivan's casual attitude surprised Mrs. Peter, and her conviction began to waver. The Auror immediately stepped forward and took Ivan's wand, placing it on the table in the middle so that everyone could see it.
I'll do it myself.
The Auror was about to cast a spell, but Mrs. Peter took a few illegal steps forward, pushed the Auror aside, raised her walking stick, and shouted.
Flashback forecast.
As the incantation was spoken, Ivan's wand began to tremble, and the stone platforms around him showed signs of transformation. This was a replay of the Transfiguration charm. Madame Peter did not wait for the wand to stop vibrating before casting another spell. A second later, a beam of light shot out from the tip of the wand and hit the stone pillar, creating a crater. This indicates that Ivan used a splinter spell a day ago.
This can't be happening, the four-flip charm.
Mrs. Peter could not believe this result. Even though the intervals between the spells in her wand had become extremely long, past the 4-day limit, she was still using the four-flip charm. At this moment, a hand reached out and took the wand away before Mrs. Peter could cast another spell.
Stop it, my wand will not tolerate such rough treatment.
Chapter 459, Sirius won free. Although Yvonne thought she could explain herself even if she was exposed, Mrs. Peter would be furious. Ivan thought it best not to upset her, in case she passed out. However, there was something strange about her, so he said,
Your Honor, I would like to ask how she was able to come in with a walking stick.
Because Madame Peter told us that she would not be able to walk without this walking stick.
The presiding judge replied helplessly. Ivan pursed his lips in displeasure. How could he not see it? The old witch had been very nimble when she tried to hit Sirius with her walking stick. As Ivan mutters to himself, Mrs. Peter asks to see Dumbledore's wand, hoping against hope. The final result was also obvious, as neither wand showed any signs of memory charms being used in 4 days. The only incident in between was the Auror's inability to force the Elder Wand to cast backtracking charms, which Dumbledore had to do himself.
Your Honor, I'm sure Mrs. Peter has no further doubts. Now that the evidence is clear, shall we sentence her?
Dumbledore asked, looking up at the chief judge. Off to the side, the old witch seemed to be in a daze, mumbling something to herself.
Ah, it seems so.
The presiding judge looked at the old witch in disappointment. As a judge, he could not be too biased, so he could only speak up.
We heard Mr. Harles's testimony loud and clear. However, we will need to hear the testimony of others in order to confirm Mr. Peter's guilt. Mr. Harles, you may go back. Now, please bring up the next witness.
As soon as the presiding judge finished speaking, an Auror approached Ivan and gestured for him to follow him. Ivan was glad to see that he had nothing else to do. He nodded politely at the crowd and left the sealed courtroom. As soon as he stepped through the threshold of the waiting room, Harry and the others who were sitting inside rushed up to him and bombarded him with questions.
Ivan
had no intention of hiding the truth, so he briefly explained what had happened at the meeting, glancing at Ron's wand as he did so and feeling very grateful. 3 days earlier, at the observatory, she had used Ron's wand to cast the memory charm, so there was no way that Mrs. Peter could have found out.
Mr. Harry Potter, please come with me.
The Auror behind Ivan said sternly, interrupting the conversation.
May.
Harry pointed to himself, expecting it, but nervous about actually playing.
Go on, it's all right, Dumbledore and Sirius are there.
Ivan assured her with a smile. It seemed to him that the outcome of the trial had already been decided, so Harry and the others went through the motions. Relieved to hear this, Harry followed the Auror to the interrogation room. Ivan sat in the waiting room chatting with Ron and Hermione while waiting for the verdict. After more than an hour of waiting, Ron and Hermione were called out one after another, and Harry, having finished his statement, returned to the waiting room. Harry, however, had a strange expression on his face. He looked at Ivan, who was about to speak but stopped himself.
Ivan, what did you say to them in court? I get the feeling that a lot of people are looking at me funny, and a strange lady is asking me if I want to move in with her.
Nothing, just a little bit about your life at your uncle's, and they were a bit sympathetic.
Yvonne replied with a laugh.
That's all in the past.
Harry said nonchalantly.
I've discussed it with Sirius, and will move into the Black's mansion this summer.
Ivan opened his mouth to retort, as Dumbledore would never let Harry leave the Dursley household. Ivan, however, quickly shut up. Dumbledore would tell him anyway. There was no need for him to be the villain.
Really, how's it going?
Harry asked, jumping to his feet.
Sirius was acquitted, and Peter Pettigrew was found guilty of the murder of 13 Muggles, exposing the existence of the wizarding community, war crimes, and more than 20 other charges.
Hermione recounted what the presiding judge had said.
That's great.
Harry was practically jumping for joy at the news. Did the presiding judge say how to punish Peter?
Yvonne was curious.
Of course he did, Peter will.
Hermione started to speak, but someone beat her to it.
The ministry wanted to hold him for the rest of his life, but Peter was an animagus, and it would not have been easy to hold him, and the ministry could not very well keep Aurors on him every day, so they decided to give him a Dementor kiss in 7 days.
They turned to see Sirius entering the room, the shackles on his hands removed. Although he was covered in dirt due to his previous incarceration, Sirius was beaming.
Congratulations, Sirius, you're finally free.
Ivan congratulated him.
Thanks a lot, Harles.
Sirius was grateful, having learned about Ivan's activities over the months from Dumbledore, Harry, and the others. Sirius was well aware that he owed much of his success to this young wizard. Otherwise, he would have had to worry about the Ministry of Magic every day, and would have been lucky enough to sneak into Hogwarts and kill Peter. Ivan waved his hand, dismissing Sirius's concern that he was merely fulfilling a promise, and added teasingly.
Besides, I've got a firebolt on me, so of course I have to do something.
Chapter 460, Dumbledore's Unusual.
No thanks, what do I need all these firebolt arrows for? Just for show, I don't have room for them in my house.
Ivan was speechless at Sirius's words, wondering if Black's ancestors would be furious if they found out. Yvonne shook her head to herself, but quickly got down to business.
By the way, Sirius, did you say that Peter's execution was scheduled for 7 days from now? Why wait so long?
Because of Mrs. Peter, of course.
Sirius sighed as he thought about what had happened in the courtroom. After your presentation, the presiding judge announced that Pettigrew was to be executed tonight, but Madame Peter was adamant that the trial should not be allowed to proceed. The presiding judge and committee members considered the fact that the mother and son would have to part life and death soon after they met, so they delayed it by a week so that they could see each other more often.
I wonder if she can take the shock.
Hermione said wistfully. Seeing the sudden heaviness in the air, Sirius quickly changed the subject to a trip to Hogsmeade to celebrate his escape, which reminded Harry and the others of their happy memories. Dumbledore returned to the waiting room shortly after, Fawkes still perched on his shoulder, and after some rest the golden-red bird seemed to have been rejuvenated. Now that Sirius had successfully overturned the case, there was no longer any need for them to stay, and they left the ministry together. As they climbed the lift back up to the London streets and listened to the distant honking of horns, Ivan felt as if a lifetime had passed. Did the Muggles living in London have any idea that there was a group of wizards with special abilities underground in the city?
Well, let's do it here. There's no one passing by, so hold my hand and I'll take you back.
Dumbledore said, glancing around to make sure no one was around. Ivan and the others nodded and formed a circle, as they had come, except this time there was an extra person.
Aren't you going home?
Dumbledore asked, surprised to see Sirius approaching.
It would be nice to go to Hogwarts for a few days, as I told the children I'd take them to Hogsmeade.
Sirius explained. Dumbledore nodded and said nothing more. Fawkes, on his shoulder, however, let out a disgruntled cry. Carrying 6 people at once and teleporting across territory at that was too much for Phoenix.
Professor, we can teleport to Hogsmeade and back to the castle. Good idea. Since it's your day off, we might as well celebrate before heading back.
Sirius exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. Harry and Ron agreed, as they did not want to go back to school so early. Dumbledore did not want to spoil their fun, so he agreed.
I'll see you at Honeydukes then, Harry and I.
Sirius laughed, grabbed Harry, and disappeared with a transfiguration. Come along, Mr. Weasley. We must hurry, lest there be any misunderstanding.
What about Ivan and Hermione?
Said Ron.
I think they'll find a way.
Dumbledore, knowing full well that Ivan could perform transfiguration, simply took Ron with him, placing his right hand on Ron's shoulder and waving the Elder Wand with his left. As he watched the two of them teleport away, Ivan had a vague feeling that something was off. If he remembered correctly, Professor Dumbledore should not be left-handed.
Ivan, it's time to go.
Hermione called out when she saw Ivan looking lost in thought.
Oh,
Ivan recovered, nodded, and took the witch's hand.
disillusionment.
As the incantation was chanted, the surrounding space distorted like a vortex, sucking the two of them in and throwing them out the next moment. By the time they found their footing, they were in Hogsmeade from the Muggle city of London. It was already evening, and the rays of the setting sun shone down from the sky. A large number of young wizards and witches dressed in the Academy's uniform were wandering around leisurely, and the noise and commotion were endless. Ivan tried to sense the magic in his body. The interregional teleportation had only used up a quarter of his energy, less than he had estimated. This was not only due to the increase in his magic after merging with Boggart's blood, but also because his transfiguration charm had been upgraded to level 5, greatly reducing the amount of magic required to cast it. Yvonne was lost in thought when she heard a piercing scream in the distance.
He's serious.
The sudden scream caught the attention of the young wizards, and Ivan turned his head. Sirius was now standing casually in front of Honeydukes, holding several packets of sweets in his hand. As it happened, there was a wanted poster stuck to the front of the shop, and Sirius's picture and a bounty of 10,000 galleons stood out.
Yes, it's me. Please pack up all the new sweets you have.
Sirius admitted it graciously, but sighed in disappointment at the Honeydukes owner's fearful expression.
You should read more of the latest Daily Prophet. It says so much about me. Today is the day of the retrial of the Wisengamot, and because I'm innocent, they let me out. Understand?
Chapter 461, The Party at the Three Broomsticks. Sirius' explanation did little to lighten the mood, as the Honeydukes owner continued to stare at him in horror. Anyone who saw the fugitive who had murdered a dozen muggles on the wanted poster would be horrified, even if the fugitive claimed to be off the hook. It was only after Dumbledore and Ron went over and explained the situation that the incident was avoided. It was only a minor incident, but it threw cold water on Harry and the others, who were excited to go to Hogsmeade to celebrate. Therefore, after buying a bunch of strange sweets, Ivan and the others did not stay long. Instead, they headed to the Three Broomsticks to find a remote place to party.
How could the owner do this? We bought so many things there, and he's trying to get rid of us.
Harry complained as they left Honeydukes.
That's normal, Harry. It always takes them a while to come to terms with my new status.
Sirius was quite open-minded, he was used to it. Even at Hogwarts, the situation was similar. Other than some Gryffindor students who did not care who he was, the lesser wizards of the other houses avoided him. In fact, Sirius was worried that the owners of the Three Broomsticks would kick them out as well, which would prevent the celebration from taking place. Fortunately, the situation was not as bad as it seemed, as the owner, Madame Rosmerta, was very understanding and well-informed.
Mr. Black, congratulations on your new life.
Madame Rosmerta said with a smile as she poured him a glass of butterbeer.
This cup is on me for free.
Sirius was so flattered that he accepted the cup and gulped it down.
It's been a while since I've had this, but the taste hasn't changed at all.
Sirius exclaimed happily, swinging the empty glass on the table and wiping the wine off his lips with his sleeve.
By the way, we're looking for somewhere to celebrate, so we won't be interrupting your business, will we?
Sirius glanced around the pub, which was quite busy, with most of the round tables full except for a few empty ones. However, his arrival caused the atmosphere to cool down, and everyone turned to stare at Sirius with suspicion and alarm.
For a fee, I have no reason to turn away my guests.
Madame Rosmerta said with a smile, putting away her empty glass.
That's true.
Sirius said, raising his voice and looking around at the rest of the bar.
How about this? To celebrate my successful exoneration, I'll be buying all of the 3 brooms tonight.
Sirius grabbed a handful of galleons from his robes and scattered them on the counter as a deposit. These galleons were part of his allowance when he bought the firebolt, which he kept in the pocket of his wizard robes. He was searched by the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic when they tied him up, but they did not dare to take the money, so they kept it. Sirius's boldness shocked all the wizards in the pub, and there was a great deal of applause and cheering.
3 more bottles, boss.
Davis would be furious if he knew that tonight's drinks were free, but he was unlucky enough not to show up today.
Oh yes, I almost forgot, you're not old enough to drink.
Sirius shook his head regretfully, then turned to Madame Rosmerta and shouted.
Boss, a couple of violets and cherry syrup sodas, no ice. Now that's what you should be drinking.
Chapter 462, Too Little Fun for Wizards. While Ivan was deep in thought, Harry, who was chatting with Sirius about life, suddenly asked him a question.
Sirius, the final Quidditch match is in 3 days' time. You'll be there, won't you? Of course, I look forward to seeing you win the Quidditch Cup, just as your father did.
Sirius exclaimed, nodding in approval.
My father?
Harry asked curiously. He had seen James Potter's trophies in the trophy room, but he did not know much about them.
He's the best Quidditch player I've ever seen, and if we hadn't been so busy dealing with the Death Eaters after graduation, he might have been a player.
Sirius laughed, then turned his attention to Harry.
But I think you're going to overtake him. I was watching from around the stadium the last time we played. You're flying really well. But I fell out of the sky.
Harry said, embarrassed at the memory.
That's because of the Dementors, isn't it? And now you've beaten them. This is the perfect time to mount the firebolt I gave you and win back the championship.
Sirius said encouragingly, patting Harry on the shoulder. The thought of his new broom gave Harry some confidence, and he nodded solemnly. Harry then seemed to remember something and turned to Ivan, asking,
By the way, Ivan, have you thought about it? Are you going to play in this year's Quidditch match? Wood and the others have been waiting for your reply. Ivan, are you also a Gryffindor Quidditch player?
Sirius asked curiously. He had given Ivan a firebolt as a gift in passing, as he had not seen Ivan at the Quidditch match.
Yes, he played with us last year,
said Harry, nodding before Ivan could reply. Harry became very excited when it came to Quidditch, telling Sirius about how they had beaten the other houses together during their first year at Hogwarts, as well as Ivan's amazing flying and pitching skills. Sirius could not believe his eyes when Harry told him that Ivan had scored 25 goals in a row, setting a new record for the highest goals scored in a single match at Hogwarts.
Our Quidditch captain, Wood, thinks Ivan can go straight to the national team.
Harry exclaimed.
I guess I was right to give you the firebolt.
Sirius did not think Harry had to lie to him, which only went to show how gifted Ivan was.
I'm not as good a flyer as Harry makes me out to be, I'm just a little better than average.
Yvonne said, waving off his flattery. He knew his place and his flying talent was terrible. In his first year, he had to use his foot to kick a broomstick into his hand. In his second year, he showed off his skills on the Quidditch pitch because he used the experience card to cheat.
Bravo, I bet Wood is thrilled. And Malfoy, he'd be shocked to see you at the game.
To Harry's surprise and delight, Ivan agreed so readily, as he felt that the Quidditch championship was assured with Ivan's participation. Seeing Harry's excitement, Ivan shook his head to himself, as he couldn't quite understand how a sport that flew into the air could be so popular. Could it be due to the lack of entertainment for wizards? Ivan thought it likely that he had been uncomfortable in the wizarding world without his mobile phone or internet when he first arrived. If it weren't for the fact that he was too young and wanted to learn all kinds of magic, he would have left the world to make money as a muggle. Ivan grumbled to himself, but he did not stop talking. After finishing the sweets on the table with the others, the night gradually darkened. Harry's spirits remained high, as if he had an endless list of things to say, and wished he could tell Sirius everything that had impressed him since he was a child. However, when he left the Dursleys to live with Sirius, he was interrupted by Dumbledore.
Harry, did you say you were planning to say goodbye to the Dursleys and move into Sirius's house this summer?
Dumbledore's expression turned grave.
Yes, Sirius and I have discussed it.
Harry nodded, unaware of the gravity of the situation and still in a daze.
That will not do, and I would not advise it.
Dumbledore shook his head.
Why?
Harry asked, looking confused. Sirius also looked at Dumbledore strangely. Dumbledore spoke slowly.
Do you remember what I told you once, Harry?
Sirius, the final Quidditch match is in 3 days' time. You'll be there, won't you? Of course, I look forward to seeing you win the Quidditch Cup just as your father did, Sirius exclaimed, nodding in approval. My father? Harry asked curiously. He had seen James Potter's trophies in the trophy room, but he did not know much about them. He's the best Quidditch player I've ever seen, and if we hadn't been so busy dealing with the Death Eaters after graduation, he might have been a player. Sirius laughed, then turned his attention to Harry. But I think you're going to overtake him. I was watching from around the stadium the last time we played. You're flying really well. But I fell out of the sky, Harry said, embarrassed at the memory. That's because of the Dementors, isn't it? And now you've beaten them. This is the perfect time to mount the firebolt I gave you and win back the championship, Sirius said encouragingly, patting Harry on the shoulder. The thought of his new broom gave Harry some confidence, and he nodded solemnly. Harry then seemed to remember something and turned to Ivan, asking, By the way, Ivan, have you thought about it? Are you going to play in this year's Quidditch match? Wood and the others have been waiting for your reply. Ivan, are you also a Gryffindor Quidditch player? Sirius asked curiously. He had given Ivan a firebolt as a gift in passing, as he had not seen Ivan at the Quidditch match. Yes, he played with us last year, said Harry, nodding before Ivan could reply. Harry became very excited when it came to Quidditch, telling Sirius about how they had beaten the other houses together during their first year at Hogwarts, as well as Ivan's amazing flying and pitching skills. Sirius could not believe his eyes when Harry told him that Ivan had scored 25 goals in a row, setting a new record for the highest goals scored in a single match at Hogwarts. Our Quidditch captain Wood thinks Ivan can go straight to the national team, Harry exclaimed. I guess I was right to give you the firebolt. Sirius did not think Harry had to lie to him, which only went to show how gifted Ivan was. I'm not as good a flyer as Harry makes me out to be, I'm just a little better than average, Ivan said, waving off his flattery. He knew his place and his flying talent was terrible. In his first year, he had to use his foot to kick a broomstick into his hand. In his second year, he showed off his skills on the Quidditch pitch because he used the experience card to cheat.
Yes.
Harry nodded hesitantly. Of course he remembered.
Yes, but there is something I have not told you.
Dumbledore's eyes under his half-moon spectacles stared at Harry for a moment, causing Harry to feel uncomfortable all over.
The precondition for this spell to work is that you must stay close to someone who is related to you.
Chapter 463, The Afterglow of the Setting Sun. Dumbledore's words made Harry feel as if he had been thrown into an ice cellar, and all his hopes for the summer holidays were dashed.
But
Harry stammered. Harry considered Sirius to be his real family, compared to the Dursleys, who treated him badly. Though they had only met less than a month ago, Harry could feel Sirius's concern for him, something he would never have felt at the Dursleys. There, it was more like a servant or slave, living in a storeroom and occasionally being scolded and told off by Dolly and his cronies. Dumbledore, however, shook his head, shattering the illusion.
That will not do, Harry. It will take a blood relative to sustain such magic. Then let it go. I'm capable of protecting myself.
Harry exclaimed angrily. Harry could not bear to live with the Dursleys any longer, since they hated him and, as it happened, he hated them.
And Sirius will protect me, won't he?
Harry looked at Sirius like a desperate beast seeking refuge. Sirius nodded solemnly, not wanting to disappoint Harry. Harry, as if emboldened, turned to Dumbledore. Dumbledore insisted, unwilling to change his mind. Harry was eager to argue further, but was silenced by Dumbledore's next words.
The protective magic you have is a result of Lily's love for you, and I'm sure she wanted it to accompany you and protect you while she was gone. Harry.
Harry fell silent, unable to retort. He felt as if a huge rock were pressing down on his heart, and his mind was filled with memories. Alerted by the change in Harry's mood, Dumbledore realized that his words were having an effect and continued.
I know exactly how you feel, Harry, but before you graduate.
Harry shouted, interrupting Dumbledore. His shout attracted the attention of the other patrons of the pub, and many of them turned to look at him. Harry was momentarily overwhelmed by this outburst, his mind in chaos, and he simply ran out of the pub.
Your right hand is injured, Professor.
Ivan asked hesitantly after the others had left their seats. Even as she asked the question, Ivan understood everything the moment he saw the ring and the scorch marks. Dumbledore, having been tricked by Lord Voldemort's Horcruxes, is likely to die soon.
But it may take some getting used to.
Dumbledore's expression became troubled, as it was difficult for someone accustomed to using their right hand to suddenly switch hands.
I see.
Chapter 464, The Missing Cloak. While thinking about this, Ivan left the pub and was surprised to find that Harry had not gone too far and was lying in a dark corner.
Harry, why are you here alone, and where are Sirius and the others?
Yvonne asked quietly, approaching him. Harry seemed to regain his composure. He looked at Ivan but did not reply.
Everyone's out there looking for you. Professor Dumbledore didn't mean any harm by what he said. He was trying to protect you.
Ivan said, leaning against the wall. Harry nodded, aware that Ivan was talking about Lord Voldemort and understanding Dumbledore's good intentions, but unable to control his emotions and deliberately avoiding Sirius and the others, wanting to be left alone.
If they try to bully you again, let me know and I'll teach them a lesson.
Sirius promised, thumping his chest.
Yes, we'll cheer you on too.
Hermione agreed. As Harry watched them, his annoyance was swept away, and his summer life was perhaps not as bad as he had imagined.
It's almost the end of term. If I were you, I'd read as many books as Ivan.
Hermione said as she picked up one of the books.
But I don't remember having to take these.
Ron glanced at the titles and pursed his lips.
High-level spell solving.
Hermione finally got a good look at the titles of the books in front of her, and then looked at the others in surprise. Advance in Magical Theory, How to Protect Your Brain, Standard Spells, Level 7, Dangerous Rating of Magical Creatures, Curses and Countercurses.
Ivan, are you preparing for your NEWT exam? Are you planning to graduate this year? No, you don't have to read these books even if you want to, do you?
Harry asked.
I have no intention of skipping a grade or graduating. I just suddenly feel that my magic level needs to be improved and strengthened.
Ivan listened as the system prompt sounded in his ear. He closed the copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Level 7, worriedly. Perhaps it was because his transfiguration had broken through to Level 6, but the benefits of reading the book were minimal, with little growth. It was, however, a weak point that made up for the lack of other charms. Ivan knew exactly what he needed right now. Due to his previous focus on the study and practice of blood magic, his basic charm theory had not been upgraded for a long time, which was a dangerous sign. If one did not have a solid foundation and did not understand the principles of a spell, one would only know how it happened but not how it happened.
What are you doing reading dark arts? If we don't know anything about the dark arts, how are we supposed to defend against it?
Ivan asked, glancing at Ron. Ron was left speechless. Ivan ignored him and turned to Harry. After a moment's hesitation, he threw a book at him.
Harry, it always pays to learn, and to know that when it comes to the crunch, the only thing that will protect you is yourself.
Harry shook his head and looked at the cover of the book, which read Power of the Mind, How to Protect Your Brain. Harry had little interest in reading, let alone such extracurricular books that had nothing to do with exams. Ivan shrugged but didn't say anything, he was just being nice. In the end, only Hermione stayed behind to read with Ivan, while Harry and Ron discussed the upcoming Quidditch match. It was not until after 10 o'clock that everyone returned to their dormitories to get ready for bed.
It's over.
Harry screamed as he took off his robe and fumbled with it.
What's the matter, Harry?
Ron, who had just lain down, asked curiously as he got up, yawning. Ivan also put down his book.
The invisibility cloak I brought with me is gone.
Harry was frantic. This morning, considering the possibility of Sirius's downfall, he took the cloak of invisibility with him and hid it in a compartment of his robe. Now, however, it was nowhere to be found.
I told you not to bring anything.
Ivan shook his head in exasperation.
Harry, are you sure it's really gone? Is it possible that it's just the cloak of invisibility and that's why we can't see it?
Chapter 465, Training Before the Competition. Ivan gave Ron an odd look, as if he had a strange way of seeing things. Harry did consider it, as his cloak of invisibility had two sides, one silver-gray in color, like a flowing fabric, and the other permanently enchanted. It is possible for such a state of affairs to occur with the other side facing up. However, after searching the dormitory, Harry and Ron found nothing.
Harry, do you remember where you dropped it? Think about when you last confirmed it.
Harry hesitated, thinking it was the most likely possibility, having been there so long.
Then let's go and find out. The 3 broomsticks shouldn't be closed at this hour.
Ivan suggested. Harry gave a quick nod. The trio slipped out of the castle and back into Hogsmeade through the secret passageway. They were relieved to see the brightly lit pub. Harry eagerly searched for where he had been but found nothing. The owner of the pub, Madame Rosmerta, noticed their odd behavior and approached them.
What are you doing? Did you drop something?
Madame Rosmerta immediately guessed the predicament they were in. After all, many alcoholics in the pub tended to lose things when they had too much to drink, and they often returned the next day looking for it, so she was used to it.
Yes, ma'am, I've lost my cloak.
Harry was very anxious, and he looked at Madame Rosmerta with hope in his voice. Madame Rosmerta was a little surprised. The cloak of invisibility was a very valuable magical object, sometimes selling for over 100 galleons. It could be said that since her opening, her customers had lost the most valuable object they had ever owned. Madame Rosmerta shook her head at Harry's expected look.
I am sorry, child, but I did not see your cloak of invisibility, and no one has found it and brought it to me.
Madame Rosmerta continued with a sigh.
But are you sure it's here? Could it have fallen somewhere else? After you left, I tidied up your table and found nothing.
There is, of course, the possibility that Madame Rosmerta did not mention it, that the invisibility cloak was taken by another customer.
Why don't we try the ministry again? We've been to both of them today.
Ron suggested.
Yes, and the ministry.
Harry's spirits were uplifted and his hopes were rekindled. Yvonne hurried to stop Harry and Ron from trying to kill themselves, as the ministry staff were long gone at this hour, and it would be a serious offense to trespass.
Also, if we report this to the Ministry of Magic, they might not take it seriously. Why don't we tell Professor Dumbledore about losing the invisibility cloak and let him negotiate with the ministry?
Ivan had the presence of mind to carry out his analysis. The Ministry of Magic was not a place one could enter without an invitation. Who knows how long this will take?
Do you think pride is more important, or the cloak of invisibility?
Asked Ivan, seeing Harry struggle.
The cloak of invisibility, of course.
Harry decided, gritting his teeth. However, considering how late it was and how Dumbledore had probably gone to bed, Harry did not want to disturb him, and instead waited until the morning classes were over before heading to the headmaster's office alone.
Well, what did Professor Dumbledore tell you? Did he yell at you?
Ron asked as Harry left the headmaster's office.
No, it's not.
Harry seemed a little out of sorts. Harry would much rather have been scolded by Professor Dumbledore than treated in such a bland manner, perhaps making him feel better. Ivan frowned when he heard this, finding it strange. Harry's cloak of invisibility is not one of those cheap things they sell on the market, but a deathly hallows. What Dumbledore has been after for most of his life. Now that Harry had lost it, the old professor hadn't even reprimanded him. Ivan was confused. Had Dumbledore, after years of research, discovered that the so-called Deathly Hallows were just for show and that losing them was no big deal? Unable to come to terms with the situation, Ivan had to give up. If Dumbledore couldn't be found, then the three of them couldn't.
Welcome back to the team.
Chapter 466, Is It Too Late to Regret Now? With Ivan's addition, Wood was in high spirits. When he met the Slytherin captain, Marcus Flint, 2 days ago, he boasted that the Quidditch trophy was destined to be Slytherin's. This was because Slytherin had managed to pull away from Gryffindor by over 100 points in the previous matches. However, having seen Ivan's flying and pitching abilities, Wood was confident that he could bring the score back. They were the perfect, invincible Gryffindor team. It's time to show those Slytherin bastards who's king of the field. Wood went a great lengths to prepare a new tactic. However, the training did not go as smoothly as Wood had hoped. Harry was so distracted as a seeker that he often missed training sessions and did not even notice when the snitch flew past him.
Stop, all of you, stop.
Wood snapped, quickly calling a halt to the training.
Harry, what the hell are you doing? That golden snitch was right in front of you and you didn't even notice it. If this was an official match, we'd lose.
Wood was furious. Harry's performance was worse than ever.
I'm sorry, Captain. I was just thinking about something.
Harry said sheepishly. He was still trying to figure out where he had dropped his cloak of invisibility, so he was distracted.
I don't care what you think, but when it comes to the game, your only job is to catch the golden snitch. Win, do you understand?
Wood interrupted Harry sternly. Harry gave a reluctant nod. Training then resumed, and Ivan was under a lot of pressure as one of the two cores of the new tactic. Because Wood gave him the target of 15 goals in an hour. This means an average of 4 minutes to score a goal.
I'm sure you can do it. Go for it.
Wood pumped his fist solemnly against Ivan's chest. With that, he and his team split into 3 teams and ran Ivan around the stadium. Ivan was distracted for a moment, and then he saw Wood, who was chasing him, hit the bludger with his club. "You son of a biscuit!" Ivan cursed to himself as he dodged to the side, then turned his body to avoid George and Fred's attacks and threw the quaffle into the hoop. Ivan did not look happy about scoring again. In the space of half an hour, Wood had figured out his strategy, and under his command the defense was watertight, making scoring increasingly difficult.
Faster, faster.
Surrounded by the mob, Ivan was having as much trouble dealing with them as he had been on the battlefield. He was beginning to regret agreeing so quickly, not knowing that he could back out now.
All right, that's all for today's training.
Wood said as he landed on his broom and waved everyone over. After an afternoon of hard work, George and the others were relieved, but when they reached the ground, Wood scowled and scolded them.
What the hell just happened? There were 5 of you, but you couldn't stop one of them. What if he was our enemy, waiting for death? And you, George, you were too slow when I told you to intercept him on the left.
Wood's mouth was like a cannon as he rattled off instructions to correct their mistakes in the confrontation. Ivan then realized that the training was not just for him. Wood really had a good plan. If he hadn't scored 15 goals in an hour, he would probably be the one getting scolded. George, on the other hand, curled his lip at Wood's rebuke. Wood himself had been there during the chase for Ivan and had failed to stop him from scoring. Fred, Angelina, and the others defended themselves.
Ivan's firebolt was too fast, like lightning. How could we have caught up? Yes, Hales is also very good at flying. It's only natural that we can't stop him. Those Slytherins certainly can't.
However, no matter how they tried to explain, Wood scolded them and said that he would continue training in the future. The stadium was suddenly filled with the cries of George and the others.
Hales, you've done well. If you can keep this up the day after tomorrow, we'll win.
In fact, Wood did not expect Ivan to be able to score 15 goals in an hour. He just wanted to set a high goal for Ivan to work towards. To her surprise, Ivan did it. Wood praised Ivan's flying skills and then changed the subject, saying that he would try harder next time and try to score 20 goals in an hour. Ivan rolled his eyes. He had pushed himself to his limits, and it would be impossible for him to improve in a short period of time. As he spoke, Wood reminded Ivan to keep it a secret and surprise his opponents.
Those Slytherins don't know you're in yet.
Wood said proudly.
You're our secret weapon.
Chapter 467, The Weird Miss Novgood. At the end of the training session, Ivan returned to his dorm room and began writing a letter with a quill. The letter was very simple. Ivan then remembered the sign Luna had made, smiled, and cast a small spell on the letter. When she was done, Ivan put the envelope in her mouth and said to her,
Give this to Luna of Ravenclaw, the one with the funny face, got it?
Although he was in the same castle as Luna and could be seen at dinner in the Great Hall, he ran over to report his participation in a Quidditch match. That would be too strange and bad for secrecy, so I'd better write.
Ivan, are you sending a letter? To whom?
Harry asked as he watched Ivan release the matcha.
Just a friend.
Ivan replied. At the same time, in the Tower of Ravenclaw, the young wizards and witches who had had dinner were returning to their dormitories. One of the figures seemed to be alone, but she did not seem to care about her situation and hummed a tune leisurely. Such mavericks attracted the attention of lesser wizards, and over the past 2 years, Luna had become a celebrity in Ravenclaw. She was even given the nickname Ravenclaw's Mad Lady or the Strange Miss Novgood. So when Luna walked past, people whispered to each other.
She was such a crazy girl. I heard she was looking for creatures that didn't exist.
The whispers grew louder, and when everyone else in the room agreed, the discussion that could only have been held in private became open and honest. Luna heard the comments but did not react, or perhaps she was too used to it.
Do you really think the Snorkak exists, Novgood?
Ah, yes.
Luna turned her head to look at him, then corrected him earnestly.
And you should have called him.
Luna's reply caused the Ravenclaw wizards to laugh, and the atmosphere in the tower became unusually cheerful.
I looked it up. There's no such thing as a Snorkak.
The Ravenclaw boy retorted triumphantly.
The world is too big for anyone to see the whole picture, and if there are always creatures that go unnoticed, then perhaps the Snorkak exists too.
Luna retorted, her voice like a ballad, not caring about their teasing. Luna's explanation was less satisfying and more like an argument, so the jeers continued. However, as Luna did not reply, they were unable to find any new entertainment. It was as if all the effort they had put into hitting her had been wasted on cotton. It was really boring, so they stopped teasing her. Luna sauntered back into her dorm room. The incident had not stirred her emotions. However, the situation in the dormitory was not good. Several plants in her basin had been maliciously pulled out, and the ornaments on her bed had fallen off. The usual pranks.
Aurora.
Luna frowned and suddenly turned to look at the young witches in the dormitory. The young witches were amazed. They had teased Luna many times, but she never responded.
Yes,
Said the young witch Aurora.
I see it says Ivan Howells, or do you like him?
Scoffed another Ravenclaw girl.
We're friends.
Luna began to explain.
Friend, is Ivan Howells a friend of yours? Why didn't we know?
Aurora interrupted. She had never seen Luna interact with the famous Ivan Howells.
Yes, friend.
Chapter 468, The Gryffindor Bowler is Back. Luna laughed at the contents of the letter. His roommates were very surprised.
Who sent you the letter? Your father. It seems he didn't send you the nonsense newspaper this time.
Aurora mocked. Luna ignored her and tried to put the letter away. However, Aurora was angry at her for ignoring her attitude and snatched the letter away. At first glance, Aurora exclaimed when she noticed the signature at the bottom of the envelope.
Ivan howls.
When the other witches heard this, they crowded forward to take a look.
Can I have the letter back?
Luna asked, her tone flat and unhappy. Aurora made no move to return the letter, but instead questioned her suspiciously.
Don't tell me you forged this letter. Why would Ivan Howells send it to you in such a roundabout manner when he was about to enter a Quidditch match? Why not just come and tell you?
The other young witches in the dormitory were equally incredulous. As Aurora had said, they were all at the same school, so close to each other. Why would she send a letter over on such a trivial matter? So Luna might have faked it herself, pretending to have a famous friend in response to their jeers. As strange as this was, and no one in their right mind would do such a thing, she was Ravenclaw's mad lady, and no one could read her mind.
Give me back the letter, Aurora's.
Luna repeated, her displeasure written all over her face. Aurora giggled and made no attempt to acknowledge Luna, as if she intended to show the letter to everyone. Luna drew her wand and pointed it at him.
Petrify them all.
An ethereal voice sounded in the dormitory, and white light instantly shot out from the tip of the wand. Aurora's smile faltered and turned to one of horror. She did not expect Luna to attack her, and was caught completely off guard. In just a few moments, Aurora felt her body harden rapidly, and her consciousness stopped there. Luna's sudden outburst caught everyone by surprise, and her roommates who had been laughing at her were stunned.
My God, how dare you attack Aurora with magic?
You're finished, I'll tell Professor Flitwick. Keep an eye on her, I'll get the prefect to come.
When the witches recovered, they began to lash out in anger and terror, and some even pointed their wands at Luna. Luna ignored them, acting as if they didn't exist. She took the letter back from Aurora, folded it, and put it away. Luckily, Luna soon recalled that Ivan had taught her the cleaning charm in the corridor a month ago, which might come in handy. Well,
Clean it up.
a gust of magical wind swept over the sign like an eraser, erasing the messy picture marks and revealing the sign for what it was. The golden writing was originally enchanted, so it was not affected by the cleaning charm. The little witch nodded in satisfaction. The cleaning charm she had learned.
Done.
As the gates to the arena opened, Ivan mounted his firebolt and flew out of the tunnel. The originally empty seats were now packed with people, and the young wizards enthusiastically raised various signs to cheer on their house's team. These words were joined by Jordan's enthusiastic explanation.
Now for the Gryffindor team. As you all know, due to Harry accidentally falling out of the sky due to the Dementors, he unexpectedly lost against the Hufflepuff team, resulting in a gap of over 100 points between him and Slytherin.
Who sent you the letter? Your father. It seems he didn't send you the nonsense newspaper this time.
It's Ivan Howells, my God, he's in the game.
Jordan shouted with excitement, and with the help of the resounding charm, his voice drowned out the cheers and echoed across the stadium. Like Jordan, many of the lesser wizards on the pitch discovered that the Gryffindor team had been replaced by a new player, and Ivan, who had previously refused to play, returned to the pitch. The Gryffindor Lions were overjoyed, as they did not expect much from the match due to the difference in points, and were certain they would lose the Quidditch Cup, but Ivan's appearance gave them hope. After all, Ivan was quite impressive, scoring 25 goals in a row last year.
Great, our Gryffindor pitching machine is back.
Chapter 469, Why don't you just call him Seamus? You're the bastard who gave me such an ugly nickname.
Ivan Howells, go.
And looked over with her beautiful eyes. Ivan inclined his head to her, noting the others cheering him on. For example, Hermione and Ron put up a large banner to cheer him and Harry on. Sirius was there, though his eyes were fixed on Harry. Ivan was distracted by Malfoy's sarcastic voice.
Hales, I thought you said you weren't going to compete. Ah, yes, that was true before, but I've changed my mind and I think it would be nice to play once in a while.
Yvonne said playfully, turning her head. Malfoy and the others didn't look happy. They hadn't expected Ivan to take the field so suddenly. After all, he had been so determined not to take part.
Art A.
Marcus shouted at the start of the match. A tactic was a defensive system, originally intended to be used against Ivan. Although the tactic had fallen behind practice due to recent intelligence lapses, it still had a solid foundation. The rest of the Slytherin team quickly got into position. A chaser and two beaters rushed to stop Ivan, creating an opening for another chaser to snatch the quaffle. Yet Ivan's firebolt was too fast. In midair, like a flash of red lightning, it penetrated their defenses in a matter of moments, leaving them in the dust.
Stop.
The Slytherins screamed at Marcus, but it was to no avail. Their broomsticks were too slow. Ivan took advantage of the fact that no one was adjusting to his speed and quickly grabbed the quaffle, then went around the defensive line and threw the ball into the hoop.
So fast.
Jordan's high-pitched voice carried across the pitch, and Ivan's unexpectedly impressive performance lit up the stadium. Ivan's name was shouted so loudly that even some Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff wizards stood up and cheered him on. The Slytherins' faces darkened. How could he be happy when he had lost 10 points in the first match? However, they were able to quickly compose themselves and, under Marcus's command, attempt to stop Ivan. It was clear to both Gryffindor and Slytherin players that the outcome of the match depended on only two things. The first is whether Ivan can close the gap, and the second is when Harry and Malfoy will catch the golden snitch and end the game. Preventing Ivan from closing the score seemed unrealistic to Marcus, who could only hope that Malfoy would catch the golden snitch and end the game. Malfoy, who had taken on the team's hope, felt under pressure. Normally, at the start of a match, the golden snitch would take the initiative to move away from people, deliberately avoiding them, and would only slowly approach over time, so it was not easy to find. However, Ivan's goal was too fast, and as the score drew closer, Malfoy complained about his team's incompetence and desperately searched for the golden snitch. Harry's task was relatively easy, as he had to wait for Ivan to close the gap to 150 points before he could act, otherwise catching the snitch would be pointless. As such, his only task was to keep an eye on Malfoy and prevent him from catching the golden snitch. On the other side of the arena, the fight over the quaffle was heating up, with Ivan taking advantage of the firebolt's speed and his own superior flying skills.
No, stop him.
Seeing that Ivan's goal had officially brought the score closer to 150 points, Marcus was about to lose his mind, but he was powerless to stop it and could only rage in frustration. However, his anger soon turned to numbness after Ivan's repeated goals, and Marcus could only hope that Malfoy would catch the golden snitch and end the match. Because the match lasted only an hour, the score was almost tied, and the Slytherin chasers tried their best to score 2 goals, but to no avail. At this rate, Marcus doubted Gryffindor would be able to overtake them, or even score over 150 points, which would make the Slytherin team's capture of the golden snitch useless.
Get the golden snitch, Malfoy, and I'll give you half an hour.
Chapter 470, This Isn't Fair.
I'm trying to find it.
Malfoy, who was wandering around the arena, replied angrily. At that moment, a golden light flickered not far ahead.
Hales has scored again. With one more 10 points to go, Gryffindor will have a 150-point lead over Slytherin.
The intensity of the battle caused commentator Jordan's voice to grow hoarse from shouting, but his spirits were high, as Gryffindor's victory was at hand. After a pause, Jordan's tone changed and he began to commentate on the battle in the sky, deviating away from Harry and Malfoy's uninterrupted duel.
We can see that Potter and Malfoy have found the golden snitch, and that's the only chance Slytherin has of winning, if Malfoy catches it before Harles can throw another ball. Of course, I don't think Malfoy will have a chance. Potter will catch the golden snitch before he does.
Jordan's commentary was so obviously biased that many of the Slytherin wizards in the stands protested. The battle for the golden snitch had reached a fever pitch, and Harry was able to catch up to Malfoy with his broomstick. However, the snitch's movements were unpredictable and extremely difficult to catch, so it has yet to succeed.
Potter, it's not too late to turn around. There might be a Dementor flying down from above. Don't fall out of the sky like last time.
Malfoy said sarcastically, glaring at Harry.
I know how to deal with them, you worry about yourself.
Harry retorted, ignoring Malfoy's taunt. Up ahead, the golden snitch was wandering aimlessly through the air, but its speed was getting slower and slower until it came to a standstill. The two of them immediately understood that the time to attack had come. Both brooms flew forward at once, Harry's faster and Malfoy's closer. They arrived at the same time, neither willing to back down, and collided with each other, causing both Harry and Malfoy to wince in pain and reach for the snitch. At the same time, Ivan scored his final goal.
Great, we won. We've won the cup, we've won the cup.
On the pitch, George and the others were equally delighted, and high-fived each other on their brooms to vent their excitement. When they reached the ground, Wood threw his arms around everyone with tears in his eyes, especially Ivan and Harry.
You guys are the best. I feel like I've been perfect for the past 7 years.
Wood exclaimed as he looked around the room. He was leaving Hogwarts after graduating next year, and his only wish was to win the Quidditch Cup again. Everyone laughed happily and then went to collect their trophies.
Sirius, did you see that? We won.
Harry exclaimed as he held the Quidditch trophy aloft.
Yes, wonderful.
Sirius beamed, looking at Harry and the others in their golden red uniforms and thinking back to his time at school with James and Lupin. In contrast to the excitement and joy, the Slytherin players were crestfallen, and Marcus was angrily berating them.
They're flying so fast we can't catch them. It's not fair.
Malfoy protested. He was so close to the snitch that he would have been the one with the firebolt. Other Slytherin players complained about this, loudly enough for Harry and the others to hear. Seeing that the Slytherin team was still unconvinced, Ron said,
Malfoy, we didn't ask you to change your broomsticks last year when your team used the Nimbus 2001.
Yes, we lost the match because of the Dementors, and we didn't get Hufflepuff back.
Hermione retorted. The Slytherin players were speechless, and Malfoy glared at them but said nothing. George said with a grin. Harry and the others nodded and prepared to return to the lounge to celebrate.
Hey, where's Ivan?
Hermione looked around, but Ivan was nowhere to be seen. With her reminder, everyone realized that the one who had won the championship was not there.
I just saw him. I think he went over there.
Chapter 471, Friends. At the same time, Luna was walking down the corridors of the castle with the sign in her arms. She looked at Ivan and her ethereal voice rang out.
You were flying really well. I don't think even a professional chaser could be as good as you.
Yvonne was surprised. She had expected Luna, with her cool personality, to be unimpressed by the sport's intensity.
Well,
Luna said, shaking her head. Yvonne was speechless. She didn't know how to respond. Luna's ideas were always wild. However, as they walked together, Ivan was vaguely aware that someone was following them, so he stopped and looked back. As he watched, several witches in Ravenclaw costumes ran off in panic.
are they friends of yours?
Yvonne asked curiously.
No, they're my roommates.
Luna explained, shaking her head.
They accidentally read your letter to me, only they didn't want to believe that I had such a famous friend, any more than they wanted to believe that the Snorkak actually existed.
Ivan looked at her with pity and suddenly remembered the first time he saw Luna in his dormitory during his first year of school. He frowned and questioned her.
Do your roommates still tease you that much?
Maybe they just like to play pranks.
Luna suggested.
But they don't have the guts to do it now. After all, I'm a friend of Ivan Howells, a Hogwarts star and a second-class Merlin.
At this, Luna began to laugh. Ivan scratched his head. How could he not know that he had such a deterrent? However, when Luna said so, Ivan abandoned the idea of interfering. Everyone had their own way of living, and the little witch was clever enough to know how to protect herself.
By the way, if you haven't made any friends at Ravenclaw House, why don't I introduce you to some friends, some very nice people?
Ivan suggested. This was why he had come to Luna. Yvonne did not want to miss the opportunity to befriend Harry and the others just because Luna had known her in advance. Luna merely smiled, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. As they were talking, they saw Harry, George, and the others walking towards them.
Ivan, what are you doing here? We were looking for a place to celebrate, and you ran off on your own.
George said jokingly as he patted Ivan on the shoulder. George then turned his attention to Luna, who was standing next to Ivan.
She is.
I was just going to introduce you too.
Ivan laughed and pointed at Luna.
Luna Lovegood, my friend from Ravenclaw.
Luna, the crazy girl from Ravenclaw.
Angelina blurted out, remembering the gossip she'd heard with her friends. George shot her a quick glare.
Ah, sorry, I didn't mean that.
Angelina immediately changed her words and looked at Luna in embarrassment.
It's okay.
Luna shook her head slowly, not caring. She was used to people calling her that.
Hello, everyone.
What should have been warm words came out of Luna's mouth rather flatly, which made Harry and the others feel awkward, but they responded enthusiastically. Hermione, on the other hand, was staring at Luna, especially at the sign in her arms.
Are you looking at it? I made it myself.
Luna said, picking up on this and holding up the sign in her arms. It was only then that Harry and the others noticed a sign that read,
Ivanhoe's Go.
particularly one that showed two tiny figures holding hands. Luna's drawing skills were superb, and anyone could see that she and Ivan were drawn in a circle between the two figures, in which a single word was marked with golden magic, friend. George and Fred looked at Luna and Ivan strangely, and Hermione pursed her lips and said nothing.
Aren't you celebrating? What are you waiting for?
Yvonne asked, changing the subject.
Ah, yes, let's go to the Great Hall.
Fred was very good at pulling Harry and the others away, while George occasionally cracked jokes to liven things up. It was difficult for Luna to get a word in edgewise, as she did not know Harry well and did not enjoy changing herself to fit in. To Ivan's relief, Luna was not left out, as Hermione unexpectedly got on well with Luna and they argued about the existence of badgers for an hour.
I've read a lot of books, and there's nothing in the Encyclopedia of Magical Creatures or the British Biological Guide about harassing crickets.
Hermione exclaimed.
Ah, I've read them too, but they say that many creatures have been slowly discovered in the last 100 years, and that the harassment tadpole is not recorded. It's likely that no one has found it yet.
Luna retorted.
If there's no proof it ever existed.
Hermione argued vehemently.
That's why I'm looking for it.
Luna replied casually. A strange scene took place in the Hogwarts Great Hall. Ivan and the others celebrated the Quidditch victory, while the two witches argued. This continued until late in the evening, when Luna left for the Ravenclaw table. Harry, Ron, and George were so relieved that the celebrations were impossible to carry out. Ivan shook his head. It seemed that introducing Luna to them had not gone as well as he had hoped.
Ivan, how did you end up befriending her?
George asked suggestively, putting emphasis on the word.
Friend.
He was curious about this. Luna was Ravenclaw's famous madwoman, who would hang a wine cork around their neck as a decoration. However, if one ignored these strange habits, the other party was quite cute. Could it be because of this? Yvonne could tell that George was mistaken, but she tried to explain.
If you knew her better, you'd see that Luna is quite nice, despite her eccentric personality.
Chapter 472, I Can't Help It, I've Always Been This Smart. Harry and the others were suspicious of Ivan's words.
You really think she's nice?
Hermione asked Ivan suddenly, her voice harsh.
That's true for a friend.
Ivan paused, then nodded. It was clear from the original timeline that Luna was loyal and intelligent enough to her friends. During his first year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, she indirectly helped him break the Slytherin code, so he was grateful to have her as a friend.
And you also believe that harassment crickets actually exist?
Hermione sounded offended.
I don't know, I never jumped to conclusions about the unknown.
Ivan shook his head and answered truthfully.
Pestilence is just a figment of her imagination, it doesn't exist.
Hermione exclaimed angrily, gathering her things and leaving the Gryffindor table.
Where are you going, Hermione?
Yvonne asked, puzzled by her sudden departure. Hermione did not look back, and it was only after a while that a voice spoke.
The library.
Understanding and feeling a renewed sense of urgency at Hermione's efforts, Ivan reached into his pocket, where he had placed the extension charm, and pulled out a copy of Advanced Spell Explanation.
Ivan, aren't you coming with us to the library?
Angelina suddenly asked.
Why would I want to go there? All the books I want to read are here.
Ivan was very curious. He patted the books on his hands, then took a few books out of his pocket and stacked them together. Previously, Ivan had borrowed all the books he wanted to read for the sake of convenience and carried them around with him. He could read them from morning till night without having to go all the way to the library. This saved him a lot of time.
Hermione, why are you?
Harry hesitated to ask.
I suddenly want to, can't I?
Hermione interrupted, glaring at them like a lion cub. Harry and Ron were momentarily silenced by her presence. Like Harry and Ron, Ivan, who was about to praise them, quickly shut up, not wanting to be scolded. Hermione put the book down, as she always did, and sat down to read. The only sound in Gryffindor's lounge was that of pages turning.
By the way, do any of you know the recipe and effects of the shrinking solution?
Ron grumbled as he took notes. Unable to find it, he looked to Harry, Ivan, and Hermione for help. Yvonne didn't look up as she answered, following her mental impression of a certain lesson. Hermione, who was sitting opposite him, spoke without thinking, and the two voices collided.
The shrinking potion allows a creature to return to its form as a child. The ingredients are daisy roots, fig rinds, caterpillars, a small drop of lettuce juice, and a mouse spleen. The ingredients are.
The shrinking potion allows a creature to return to its form as a child. The ingredients are daisy roots, fig rinds, caterpillars, a small drop of lettuce juice, and a mouse spleen. The ingredients are.
You should do it.
You should do it.
You should do it. The two voices sounded at the same time again, and the atmosphere in the lounge became awkward. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ron, who was taking notes, was so anxious that he wanted to smash his pen. What exactly were the steps to configuring it? Fortunately, Harry was able to help him in time, and Harry decided that the situation did not look good and that it would be best not to get into trouble.
Aren't you going to see your friend Luna these days?
Hermione asked after a short silence. However, Hermione could not help but emphasize the word.
Friend. Luna's at Ravenclaw, why would I want to see her? Even friends don't have to see each other this often, do they?
Chapter 473, Trelawney's New Prophecy.
But
Hermione looked at Ivan in surprise and tried to retort, but her sharp tongue seemed to have failed her today, and she began to stammer, eventually breaking into a low murmur. Yvonne couldn't hear what she was saying, but she didn't seem to care. Harry seemed to have thought of something and hesitated before speaking.
Do you think Professor Trelawney is acting strangely today?
Ron scoffed. Over the course of the school year, Ron considered himself to have figured out that the professor of divination was a fraud who played the fool. I wonder why Professor Dumbledore sent her to this school.
No, it seems different today.
Harry said, shaking his head. Ivan, who had been turning the pages of the book, stopped, closed the book, and asked Harry sternly.
Has Professor Trelawney made any new predictions?
how do you know it was a prophecy?
Harry was baffled. Before Yvonne could explain, Hermione said.
Because Professor Trelawney once prophesied to us.
Ron laughed, having been so shocked by the prophecy that nothing had happened. Harry remembered this too, and laughed along with her.
Yes, the prophecy.
Hermione said solemnly, frowning at the unconcerned pair.
It's.
Ron was so shocked that he dropped the books he was clutching.
When and how, why didn't we know?
Harry was baffled. Unlike Ron, he clearly remembered Professor Trelawney's prophecy. You?
Well, it did. Why are you asking so many questions?
Hermione glared at them, and then the little witch gave Ivan an off-center look that softened as she recalled her experience. Under Hermione's furious glare, Harry and Ron were able to keep their questions to themselves.
What exactly did Professor Trelawney tell you?
Ivan asked, changing the subject. Harry hesitated for a moment before answering truthfully. During his divination class, he accidentally left his book in the classroom and ran into Professor Trelawney, who was looking at a crystal ball. She was acting strange, like an empty shell without a soul.
When I came in, Professor Trelawney found me and she said to me, "The darkness is closing in, there is a great shadow over the sky, and the servants of the Dark Lord will be freed."
Harry paused when he heard Professor Trelawney mention death or something like that.
Do you think the Dark Lord's servant could be Peter Pettigrew?
Harry asked after much hesitation.
But isn't Peter Pettigrew in Azkaban? I don't think he's getting out, is he?
Ron asked, hoping for the best. He did not want the fable to be true at all.
That's why it's called Getting Out, isn't it?
Hermione burst Ron's bubble.
He's an animagus. Sirius said the Dementor guarding Azkaban wasn't interested in animals, and Sirius escaped in the form of a black dog.
No, Peter won't get out so easily. The Ministry knows full well that he's an animagus and they'll want to rein him in. Otherwise, if anything goes wrong, public opinion will drown Fudge. They have no reason to be negligent.
Ivan frowned deeply and retorted. A large number of wizards were already angry at the Ministry for their mistake in capturing Sirius. If Peter Pettigrew managed to escape this time, Minister Fudge would probably be forced out of office.
Right, I told you he wouldn't get away with it.
Ron was pleased to see that Yvonne was supporting his statement. However, to his surprise, Ivan quickly changed his tone and continued.
But it might be different if someone helped him.
Ivan deftly pocketed the books on his desk and called out to Harry and the others.
Without further ado, let's go and inform Professor Dumbledore.
Harry, Ron, and Hermione all realized the gravity of the situation and pushed their revision aside, hurrying to the headmaster's office.
By the way, does anyone remember the date of Peter's sentence?
As they ran down the corridor, Ivan suddenly thought of something.
I think it's today.
Hermione said with great conviction, having calculated the time. Ivan made the connection and urged them to run faster. Half an hour ago, on an island in the North Sea. As usual, Mrs. Peter used her walking stick to visit her children, but was stopped by two Aurors.
As usual, please surrender your wand, Mrs. Peter.
I don't have a wand, gentlemen, it's just my walking stick.
Chapter 474, Who Isn't a Drama Queen? Madame Peter was used to this hellish scene. However, when she thought about how her child had been locked up for 7 days, her heart ached.
You'd better hurry, I'm only giving you 10 minutes.
The Auror snapped at Mrs. Peter after opening the cell door. Although they were paid, no normal person would want to stay in such a place for too long. They would definitely lose their mind and become crazy and stupid.
Well, it's about time, madam, we should be going.
The Auror said 10 minutes later, steeling himself to interrupt their meeting.
Sir?
Mrs. Peter sobbed. Aurors shook their heads. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but it was time for Pettigrew's execution. As expected, during this short delay, 2 more Aurors walked over. When they saw this situation, they felt a little helpless. After a private discussion, the 3 Aurors forcibly pulled Mrs. Peter away, who was reluctant to leave. When dealing with ordinary criminals, Aurors did not need to interfere. The entire process was left to the Dementors. Pettigrew, on the other hand, was a rare criminal who could use an animagus, putting Dementors at risk and requiring Aurors to supervise the entire process to ensure that he died from a Dementor kiss. Not to mention the fact that the magical handcuffs on Pettigrew's hands were very precious and could block the flow of magic, and required someone to retrieve them. As she watched the dwarf being forcibly pulled away, Mrs. Peter fell to her knees and wailed. The Auror shook his head and sighed, then softened and whispered a few words of comfort.
Madam, we should go.
Mrs. Peter wiped the tears from her eyes and nodded, trembling. Reluctantly, Aurors turned to lead the way. However, just as he turned around, Mrs. Peter's eyes suddenly sharpened. She swung her walking stick and said fiercely,
Stupefy.
A low, gravelly voice sounded in the corridor outside the cell. The Auror reacted as soon as he heard the voice, but Mrs. Peter's disguise had caused him to lower his guard, and he did not expect the Auror to attack. He was also wearing protective gloves on his right hand, which, unfortunately, required one to look him in the eye to be effective.
What are you doing here, Jack?
A tall, thin Auror asked with a frown.
It's all because of that damned old woman just now. She insisted that I give the prisoner a pair of socks that she had worn before, saying that they would make life better down there.
Peter was very experienced and easily came up with a reason.
What nonsense is this? Why haven't I heard of such rumors?
The tall and thin Auror shook his head speechlessly, then looked suspiciously at Madame Peter and continued.
Honestly, how much did you charge him?
How many do you expect that old woman to have? At most, she'll only have a dozen galleons.
Madame Peter pretended to be disdainful.
Tusk.
The other Auror looked at his colleague as if he was scum. The tall, skinny Auror was a little suspicious. Although Jack usually liked to take small advantages, he was not so cruel as to take money from an old witch who was about to lose her child.
2 galleons each. Do me a favor and help me do this disgusting thing, okay? That old woman said that I have to put it on him.
Chapter 475, Furious Fudge 2 in 4000.
In your dreams, hand over the money, do what you promised.
An Auror looked at the smelly socks in Mrs. Peter's hand and waved his hand in disgust.
Really, you can't even help with such a small matter.
Madame Peter pursed her lips and took out a few galleons from her pocket. She threw them over, but her legs were trembling. She was secretly relieved. The sock in her hand was, in fact, a portkey in disguise. She had bought it with all her money from the wizarding market in Knockoff Alley, and while it did not look out of place, the Aurors would have been able to tell that something was amiss if they had examined it. As such, she had no choice but to retreat, taking a gamble that he would refuse. Fortunately, as she expected, the Aurors were reluctant to help put dirty socks on a criminal. Mrs. Peter could not help but smile. In fact, she had intended to use the portkey to teleport away with Pettigrew while they were in the cell. However, the interior of Azkaban was so well defended that not only was transfiguration prohibited, even the portkey was rendered useless. Thus, she took the risk of stunning the Auror supervising her and pretending to be the Auror in an attempt to get to Pettigrew. Fortunately, this backup plan went well.
Wait.
What's wrong?
Mrs. Peter's heart was in her mouth. She tried to pretend that she was calm as she turned to look at him.
How about this? It's not good to take your money for nothing. Why don't we help him wear it?
The tall and skinny Auror stared at Madame Peter and said word by word. His hand was already secretly pressing on the wand at his waist. The other Auror did not react at first, but he sensed that something was wrong when his colleagues looked at him. He took a few steps forward and spoke to Mrs. Peter.
Bring it to me.
Madame Peter was caught between a rock and a hard place. If she handed over the portkey, she would be found out immediately. If she did not, the 2 Aurors would attack her. She knew very well that she had no chance of defeating them, especially as the 2 Aurors seemed to be on their guard.
What's wrong with you guys? Why are you suddenly so jumpy? I told you to go, but you said it's dirty. How ridiculous. Take it, it'll save me some trouble.
Madame Peter looked at the 2 of them strangely and casually threw her smelly socks at one of the Aurors. The latter was surprised by Mrs. Peter's decisiveness and wondered if she was thinking too much. As soon as he touched it, the Auror immediately sensed that something was wrong. The texture did not feel like socks at all.
Arnold.
The unexpected turn of events caught tall and slender Auror by surprise, but he immediately recognized the effect of the portkey and, with little hesitation, waved his wand at her.
Expelliarmus.
A red beam of light bursts from the tip of the wand.
Shattered.
Chapter 475 Part 2, Furious Fudge 2 in 4000. Behind him, when the dazed Pettigrew saw Madame Peter's tragic state, he felt an inexplicable pain in his heart. Suddenly, as if he had gone mad, he rushed forward and bit the Auror's right hand with his teeth.
Let go, you lunatic.
The tall, skinny Auror did not expect this and accidentally got bitten. He immediately cried out in pain and hit the dwarf's head, trying to make him let go. Mrs. Peter did not miss this opportunity, and despite the pain in her stomach, she grabbed her wand and cast one last spell at the top of her lungs.
Stupefy.
The tall and thin Auror kicked Peter away. He did not have time to cast a spell, so he could only stare into Mrs. Peter's eyes, hoping that the protective gloves would work. Unfortunately, the spell's beam was not deflected this time, and Madame Peter's fury-filled smashing charm had long since exhausted the protective glove's magic and could not be reused anytime soon.
Quick.
Mrs. Peter cried excitedly to Pettigrew. The dwarf's memory had become very chaotic, but he could still instinctively feel that the old witch in front of him was close to him, otherwise he would not have subconsciously attacked the Auror when she was injured, so he obeyed the order and moved closer.
Please remember something.
What are you talking about?
Said Pettigrew, looking confused as memories flashed through his mind. The Dementors had descended from the sky, sensing what was happening below, but the Aurors had the advantage and were not under orders to descend.
That's great.
Seeing that Peter had finally transformed into his animagus form, Mrs. Peter was so excited that tears streamed down her face. However, the grayish-black rat hesitated, unwilling to leave. It even bit Mrs. Peter's sleeve as if it wanted to drag her away.
Don't.
Madame Peter shook her head weakly. She knew very well how badly she was injured, and she could feel her vitality being sucked away. The gray-black rat squeaked and seemed to hesitate, but Mrs. Peter's voice grew weaker and weaker, and she finally fell silent, her head cocked to one side.
Who am I, Peter Pettigrew, a Death Eater?
Peter Pettigrew muttered to himself, then shook his head as another fragmentary memory came to mind. In his memory, he seemed to be groveling to a minor wizard, berating the Dark Lord for his brutal rule.
It seems I'm a little late.
Dumbledore glanced at the unconscious Aurors on the execution ground and Madame Peter, who was bleeding to death in her Auror costume, and quickly guessed what had happened. Somewhat annoyed at Dumbledore's arrival, the Dementors swarm the old professor's soul and flee in terror.
Will someone please tell me what the hell is going on?
Fudge was furious, and he was on the verge of losing his mind. If anyone found out that Peter Pettigrew had managed to escape during the execution, it would be the end of him.
Albus, what are you doing here? Were you the one who attacked the Aurors and Dementors and freed Peter Pettigrew?
Fudge, nearly out of his mind, turned sharply to Dumbledore, anxious to find someone to blame.
Cornelius.
Dumbledore said, frowning.
I think you should be able to understand what is happening here. Perhaps you should also ask Mr. Aurors here.
Dumbledore said, waving his wand to remove the stunning spell on the Auror. A moment later, the tall and thin Auror woke up. When he saw the people on the field, he looked terrified and hurriedly explained.
Minister, just now Mrs. Peter, the mother of Pettigrew, transfigured Jack with Polyjuice potion.
Fudge interrupted the tall, skinny Auror, practically forcing the words out of his mouth. He had come at the request of Arnold, who had delivered the portkey. Fudge, however, expected to find Mrs. Peter dead and Pettigrew in custody, or his soul taken by the Dementors. Chapter 476. Are you afraid of death? I'm just afraid of delaying the Dark Lord's grand mission. Fudge scowled at the tall, skinny Auror. The latter stood there trembling, his face ashen, knowing that his career was over.
Cornelius, I don't think this is the time to hold Peter Pettigrew to account, but rather to find him as quickly as possible.
Dumbledore said, interrupting Fudge's thoughts of reprimanding him.
Of course I know that.
Fudge said impatiently. Fudge hated being told what to do, but he knew that Dumbledore was right, so he ordered his Aurors to search the island in batches with Dementors. Unless Mrs. Peter brought 2 illegal portkeys with her, Pettigrew shouldn't have got very far. Fudge gave a few more instructions, then turned back to Dumbledore, his eyes narrowing as he remembered something.
How did you happen to be here, Albus?
Fudge was puzzled. It had only been 10 minutes since Mrs. Peter's attack on the execution ground, and even he had only found out about the incident after receiving a report from Auror Arnold. How did Dumbledore get there before me? Could Arnold be Dumbledore's mole in the Ministry of Magic, so before he reported this to the Ministry? Or did Dumbledore know about Mrs. Peter's plan but refuse to reveal it to him, so that he could laugh at her and even take the opportunity to oust Minister for Magic? Fudge's glare at Dumbledore grew more hostile at this thought.
Cornelius, I have no wish to engage in combat with you. It would be pointless. Trelawney has given a new prophecy concerning Pettigrew and that man, which is why I have come all the way here.
Dumbledore's eyes were fixed on Fudge as he spoke sternly.
Prophecy?
Fudge scoffed at the absurdity of it. For some reason, Fudge was deliberately avoiding the person Dumbledore was referring to, speaking with a faint tremor in his voice.
I think you know that, don't you? It's time to face facts, Cornelius. Her other prophecy is still in the ministry.
Dumbledore had no intention of beating around the bush with Fudge, and simply repeated the prophecy he had learned from Harry.
She said to me, "The darkness is closing in, there is a great shadow over the sky, and the servants of the Dark Lord will break free."
No, it can't be.
Fudge exclaimed, feeling a chill run down his spine at Dumbledore's words. Fudge then jerked his head around and was relieved to find that his Aurors had gone to find Peter, and no one had heard them.
Why do you keep going on about that man? He's dead, Albus, sorted into the rubbish of history, never coming out.
Fudge was speaking in a low, hysterical voice. He paused for a moment before continuing.
And the ministry is not the ministry it once was. We have the power to keep the wizarding community safe.
I'm afraid you don't have the ability.
There's no point in running away. One day we'll face him again. That day should be near.
Fudge stood rooted to the spot, his face ashen as Dumbledore vanished in a flash of fire. Several hours later, the searching Aurors gradually returned to report the situation, along with the Auror who had been knocked unconscious by Madame Peter in Azkaban.
So you didn't find out where Peter Pettigrew went. What a waste.
Fudge, already in a foul mood, immediately directed all of his anger at the Aurors, and the abuse lasted for over half an hour. Several of the Aurors involved were charged with gross malfeasance by Fudge. After letting off some steam, Fudge's head began to ache with the aftermath of the incident. If word got out that Peter Pettigrew had escaped, it would be a major blow to his reputation as Minister for Magic.
No one is allowed to speak of what happened today. Peter Pettigrew was killed by a Dementor's kiss at noon today. Do you understand?
Fudge demanded, glaring at the Aurors. The Aurors nodded solemnly. Fudge didn't press the matter. He had brought along a number of trustworthy individuals, and without his orders they would not have spread the news.
"Come on out, they're goins."
At the same time, a hoarse female voice rang out from a cell deep in Azkaban. A rat slowly emerged from her sleeve and squeaked as if to thank her. The Auror's search had been so thorough that it had swept through the entire Azkaban area, and had it not been for the fact that the Aurors had allowed him to hide it in his clothes, as well as the Death Eater's feigned madness, the Aurors had been fooled.
"Don't thank me so early."
The woman leaning against the corner of the wall had a haggard look on her face. She smiled deeply, and her eyes revealed madness and ruthlessness.
"We didn't save you for nothing. Saving you is just saving ourselves."
A crazy shout came from the other end of the cell.
We need you to find the Dark Lord. Help him.
Peter could only curl up and shiver at the constant stream of words coming from all around him. He muttered.
I don't know what to do. I don't remember anything.
"Are you scared?"
Chapter 477, well said, who is willing to sacrifice? The loyal Peter did not gain the Death Eater's trust. However, the Death Eaters also knew very well that the only hope of escape was Peter.
"We will help you."
The mad woman looked at Peter balefully.
"In a few days, when the Aurors let their guard down, we will create a disturbance so that you can escape. As for when you go out, the Dark Mark will naturally guide you."
After Peter nodded, she turned to look out of the cell and continued asking.
Then,
The depths of Azkaban fell silent, and it was only natural that there would be a great disturbance in order to help Pettigrew escape. Recently, the Aurors have been in a state of high tension, and once they cause trouble, they will most likely be the target of the Aurors' anger and will most likely be executed. However, the silence only lasted for a few seconds before someone burst out laughing.
I'll do it. I'm going to go crazy if I stay here any longer.
More and more people began to speak, and those who were imprisoned in the depths of Azkaban were Death Eaters who were loyal to Lord Voldemort and would die for him.
enough, if we all die, what then? This operation will only take 3 people, and
The madwoman scolded them. The Death Eaters gradually regained their composure and began to confer with each other, except for Peter, who had been cowering in a corner, shivering.
Professor Dumbledore, what's the situation?
Ivan asked urgently, taking a few steps forward. Harry, Ron, and Hermione also looked at Dumbledore expectantly.
It seems that I was a little late. As predicted, Peter Pettigrew escaped, and it was his mother who rescued him.
Dumbledore shook his head, and explained the situation briefly. Harry and the others fell silent when they learned that Mrs. Peter, the mother of Pettigrew, had died in Azkaban, sacrificing her life to help Pettigrew escape. Ivan, on the other hand, had an idea and said,
Professor, if Pettigrew escaped not long ago, why don't we just use that?
Having finally caught Pettigrew, Ivan did not want his efforts to go to waste, so he thought of the time turner. As long as he used it to go back a few hours ago and wait for Peter at the execution ground, would he be able to escape? Dumbledore gave Ivan a look of surprise. He could read between the lines, of course, and retorted.
Hales, you should know that history does not tolerate change. When I arrived at the execution ground, Peter was gone.
That's true, but there are other ways, aren't there? For example, we could try to catch him after that.
Ivan scowled, quickly finding a solution. Since the history of Pettigrew's escape could not be changed, the time turner would confirm his whereabouts and capture him.
A very good offer.
Dumbledore nodded in agreement, but continued before Ivan could rejoice.
It is a pity that I have returned it to the ministry.
Ivan frowned in disappointment. How could things be so coincidental?
Ivan, Professor Dumbledore, what are you talking about?
Harry asked, looking at them in confusion. Ron is equally clueless as to what Ivan and Dumbledore are talking about. Hermione was the only one who understood and guessed that it had to do with the time turner.
We're just discussing a way to find Pettigrew.
Dumbledore said, changing the subject.
Anyway, I'll keep an eye on Peter Pettigrew and let you know if the ministry finds him.
After learning some details, the four of them returned disappointed, having come to report on their findings. Before leaving, Ivan cast a stray glance at the right-hand corner of the headmaster's office before turning away with Harry and the others.
He should have spotted me.
Yes, the boy has always been sharp and clever.
Dumbledore said appreciatively, taking the potion from the table and drinking it. However, the unpleasant taste of the potion made Dumbledore frown, and he complained.
Severus.
As long as you're not worried about dying suddenly, I'll give it a try next time.
Snape said coldly, his anger rising as Dumbledore continued to joke.
Now that Peter Pettigrew is gone.
We will help you, the mad woman looked at Peter balefully. In a few days, when the Aurors let their guard down, we will create a disturbance so that you can escape. As for when you go out, the dark mark will naturally guide you.
But I don't have much time, Severus.
Dumbledore interrupted Snape calmly, his words barely breaking, and after a slight pause he continued.
It was foretold that Voldemort would return eventually, Peter or no one else. The question is how he will return.
Snape stared at Dumbledore in astonishment, having guessed what Dumbledore was thinking, and because of it he was incredulous. Snape woke up with a start and spoke slowly.
Or have you found a way to destroy him?
Chapter 478, That Man is Not as Important as You Think.
You think too highly of me, Severus. All you can say is that I have a clue.
Dumbledore said slowly, shaking his head. By his guess, Tom had 6 Horcruxes in total.
If you had known better, Severus, you would have seen that what happened to Lord Voldemort was not so important.
Snape looked at Dumbledore suspiciously, wondering if the 100-year-old man in front of him had been blinded by the Dark Lord's Horcruxes.
In a manner of speaking, yes.
Dumbledore assured him. Before Snape could retort, Dumbledore looked at his blackened right hand and continued. You told me before that the potion's effect on this kind of injury lasts for about a year. What if the effect wears off after a year? What if the pent-up corrosive force immediately breaks out and kills me? Snape hesitated before speaking.
Not really. The corrosive power will gradually corrode your body, and you will truly die. But you won't be able to keep it up for long.
Snape warned.
It will last for the best part of a year, and the process will be very painful. You might find it easier to kill yourself.
Is that so? How terrible.
Dumbledore muttered to himself, raising his eyebrows, thinking that a total of 1.5 years was too short a period of time. Therefore, he was not sure if he should use other means to make more time. Darkness approaches. Snape's face darkened completely and he stormed off. He shouldn't have expected anything.
According to the prophecy, Peter must have gone to find you-know-who, presumably to help him return.
Hermione analyzed.
That's just your guess. The prophecy didn't even mention that, did it? And Professor Trelawney has always been crazy. Who knows if she's just making things up?
Ron argued, hoping for the best. He felt that the resurrection of you-know-who was impossible, and that Professor Dumbledore and the Ministry of Magic would never allow it. Harry disagreed, however, as he was more inclined to believe that Trelawney's prediction of Pettigrew's escape was true, and he soon became obsessed with Ron. Ivan, who was deep in thought, was interrupted by their argument and could not resist reminding them.
There's no point in us thinking about it now. Peter Pettigrew has escaped, and it's the Ministry's business to find him. There's no way we can intervene. You might as well worry about your upcoming exams.
Chapter 478, Part 2. That man is not as important as you think. This was, of course, easy for Ivan to do, and the tortoise was praised by Professor McGonagall, as even she could not see through it.
Hales, you're improving so fast, perhaps I won't be able to teach you this time next year.
Professor McGonagall sighed.
You flatter me, Professor.
Ivan said modestly.
I have much to improve on in Transfiguration.
In fact, he did. After hearing the prophecy from Harry, Ivan became more anxious. He was much weaker than the undulating earth demon and needed at least one more level of magic to protect himself.
Hermione, are you ready?
Yvonne asked the witch she was working with. Hermione nodded, pursing her lips. Ivan whispered the incantation and waved his wand, sending a blue beam of light at the witch. The next moment, Hermione felt as if all her worries had been swept away. She looked at Ivan and naturally recalled the time she had spent with him. The corners of her mouth gradually curled up into a smile.
It's this genuine smile, it's wonderful.
Professor Flitwick exclaimed, applauding. The other young wizards in the room, waving their wands, turned to see what was happening. The real pleasure charm triggers the memory of the subject, causing them to feel joy naturally, which was well done by Hales.
That's strange. Can my pleasure charm last that long?
Ivan muttered to himself in confusion. Had he somehow improved his magic? Hermione, who overheard Ivan's whisper, glared at him.
Ron, Yvonne, Hermione, it looks like we're going to have to hurry up. It's time for the Care of Magical Creatures exam.
Harry, who had been eating a few cakes in the Great Hall, anxiously urged them on.
Got it. I hope he doesn't get a giant spider to give us exams this time.
Ron grumbled as he swallowed a small piece of steak and burped. Ivan shook his head in amusement at Ron's complaint. Without Buckbeak's trial in the original timeline, Hagrid was able to maintain his usual style in recent classes. Not only did they bring along centaurs, unicorns, and other magical creatures that they knew, but they also intended to sneak into the lake to befriend the merpeople there. In the end, there was almost a misunderstanding, and they were chased out by the merpeople with forks. Fortunately, no one was injured.
What the hell is this? Where did you dig it out of the mud?
Malfoy scoffed.
No. These are the cuties I've bred, and I'm sure you'll like them.
Hagrid retorted, shaking his head and speaking as loudly as if he had a megaphone stuck in his throat. Harry and the others glanced at the strange creatures in the cages and decided they would never like them. Unfortunately, Hagrid didn't seem to care about their complaints. He happily gave everyone a cage and announced loudly.
Your subject today is to take care of these cuties and analyze their habits and characteristics in the morning.
Malfoy said with disgust, not wanting to be anywhere near strange creatures of unknown origin. Ivan rolled his eyes, suspecting that Hagrid was using the exam as an excuse to use them as coolies. Not knowing if it was revenge or not, Hagrid threw a farting fish to Malfoy as part of the cage assignment. A few hours later, Malfoy was being tortured to the point of madness.
Harry, Ivan's.
Sirius greeted them when he saw them, then handed them a copy of the Daily Prophet.
Come and read this newspaper, all of you.
Yvonne glanced at it curiously, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione joined her. The headline read that Peter Pettigrew had been executed, and the following was a tribute to the Ministry's strict enforcement of the law.
What? Peter Pettigrew's dead. Did the Ministry catch him again?
Said Ron happily.
No way, Professor Dumbledore would have told us.
Ivan exclaimed, shaking his head. Also, if you look at the date of Peter's execution, it was on the day of his escape, and the news didn't get out for so long, it's probably fake news. The ministry is probably trying to cover up Peter's escape so that everyone thinks he's dead. Chapter 479, How Dare They Do This? Yvonne shook her head. This was a good opportunity to get rid of Fudge, and Dumbledore could use this as an excuse to get rid of him. Unfortunately, the old professor had been plotted against by a Horcrux ring and did not have much time left. He probably had no intention of seeking the position of Minister for Magic.
How dare they?
Harry had not expected the ministry to be so shameless as to lie through their teeth. Ron looked as angry as Hermione. Sirius sighed, having been told of Peter's escape from Azkaban several days earlier. He was already annoyed by it, and when he saw the news today, he almost wanted to go to the Daily Prophet and ask what was going on. In his spare time, Sirius wondered if he should get a job and even considered becoming an Auror, but after this incident, he was thoroughly disappointed with the ministry.
Let's not talk about Peter's troubles, let's talk about something happy. Congratulations, Ivan, you're going to be the youngest ever recipient of the Order of Merlin.
Yvonne was taken aback but quickly recovered, somewhat pleasantly surprised.
They've finally agreed, that's not easy.
Although Ivan had long known that he would definitely receive the Order of Merlin, he still felt uneasy about not confirming it.
Oh my God, is that true?
Hermione asked, looking at Ivan and Sirius in surprise.
As far as I know, those who receive the Order of Merlin are well-known figures, such as Professor Dumbledore.
No, it's right here. According to you, Ivan's quite a celebrity now.
Sirius joked, pointing to the Daily Prophet. Harry and the others noticed that the second page of the Daily Prophet reported news of Headmaster Dumbledore and Minister for Magic Fudge nominating Ivan for the Order of Merlin. At the end of the report, the head of the Order of Merlin responded, praising Ivan's outstanding contribution to the wizarding community over the years and agreeing to the nomination.
Congratulations, Ivan.
Harry congratulated him.
That's a first-class Order of Merlin. I bet Percy would be jealous if he found out.
Ron said admiringly.
This time Minister for Magic Fudge did the right thing, or else I would have wondered if he had a brain at all.
Sirius's words were sharp, and the ministry's repeated actions disgusted him. Yvonne rolled her eyes. Fudge had only been willing to nominate him in the first place because she had offered him a compromise in Dumbledore's capacity. This could not be explained to Sirius or the others. However, Ivan looked at the time written at the end of the paper and found that the Order of Merlin was quite quick in handing out the medals this time. They did not dawdle like before, but chose to do it 3 days later, just as they were finishing their exams and summarizing their studies. Ivan's tense mood relaxed a little at the prospect of getting his hands on a bit of lore, and then he remembered something else, so he looked at Sirius and asked,
By the way, Sirius, may I come to your house this summer?
Ivan did not forget that one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, the Slytherin locket, was kept in the Black family home. In order to prevent this thing from being taken away like in the original time and space, and eventually retrieved after much difficulty, it was better to destroy it as soon as possible. This was Voldemort's 4th Horcrux, and once destroyed, the Dark Lord would only have the Hufflepuff cup and Harry to rely on. If calculated correctly, it would not be impossible to destroy all the Horcruxes and send Voldemort away before he could revive. Sirius was, of course, unaware of Ivan's schemes, but welcomed him as a guest.
In fact, I would have invited you even if you hadn't asked, and Harry, Hermione, and Ron would have welcomed you to join me for the summer.
Sirius said with a smile. Hermione and Ron promised to come if they were free during the summer holidays. Harry happily agreed, having realized that just because Professor Dumbledore forbade him to move did not mean he had to stay at his uncle's house all summer.
Then it's settled.
Ivan said, suddenly feeling tired. He was only a third-year wizard, and he had to worry about the Dark Lord's resurrection. This is too much to bear.
Why does Snape keep picking on us?
Ron asked angrily as he left the examination room.
Didn't Sirius and Professor Lupin tell us? It's a generation-old feud. They and Snape never got along well as students.
Ivan explained.
So my father got into trouble with Snape when he was a student, and that's why he remembers it.
Harry thought it was ridiculous that Snape would try to get even with him after all these years.
That's one way to look at it.
Chapter 480, Order of Merlin and Malfoy the Snitch.
So we're just going to let him take points.
Ron asked indignantly. Hermione looked at Ron and Harry and couldn't help but comment.
If your potion skills were improved, Professor Snape would not be able to target you.
Hermione said that since there was no way to change the situation, she would have to change herself so that Snape would have no reason to attack her. Harry and Ron, on the other hand, pursed their lips. How could it be so easy to improve on potions so quickly? They were even prepared to receive an extremely low evaluation in potions. The only relief to Harry and Ron was that the next few exams went well. Whether it was Wednesday afternoon's herbology test or Professor Lupin's carefully prepared outdoor exams, they passed easily and passed the week without incident. By the time the final exam was officially over, it was as if the burden had been lifted from the hearts of the Hogwarts students. The atmosphere in the castle was no longer as tense as before. Instead, the students were indulging themselves, and there was laughter and laughter everywhere. As for the announcement of the exam results, that would have to wait, as they still had several days to relax before the final results came out. It was in this atmosphere that Ivan finally found the day that the Order of Merlin was awarded, as reported in the Daily Prophet. It was much grander than the last time, with the great hall hung with a red lion flag, and the ceiling enchanted to play jazz as people walked by, and light of every color falling from the sky.
Everyone, please be quiet. I have one more announcement to make. I'm sure you're all aware of Peter Pettigrew's capture a month ago.
When Dumbledore finished speaking, there was a brief silence. Although the Daily Prophet had reported the incident several days earlier, there were not many people interested in reading the newspaper, so most of them were new to the news.
Is that true?
George asked, looking at Yvonne in amazement. When Ivan nodded, George shouted,
Jesus, that's a first-class Merlin.
As of today, we are acquainted with some of the most important wizards in the wizarding world.
Fred was equally excited. Ivan rolled his eyes and ignored them, rising to his feet and heading from the long table to the front of the stage to applause. Dumbledore personally took a shiny golden medal from a box handed to him by a wizard and hung it on Ivan's chest. At the same time, Ivan heard a system prompt in his head, indicating that, rather than a new achievement, he had been promoted a level. Legendary title, Merlin Knight. Legend level. Legend, over the years, your contribution to the wizarding community has been acknowledged by many wizards and witches. You are truly a Knight of Merlin. Remark, your evil ambition is hidden behind a veneer of brilliance and remains unknown to this day.
I would like to thank the professors of Hogwarts, in particular for their achievements today.
From the stage, Ivan gave a well-rehearsed speech, then shook hands warmly with the Order of Merlin and the Ministry of Magic representatives.
Bad news, Ivan.
Ivan bade the Order of Merlin farewell and was about to return to the Gryffindor lounge when Hermione came running to him.
What's wrong?
Yvonne sounded genuinely confused.
Malfoy said he was going to tell the Ministry that Professor Lupin was a werewolf.
Hermione exclaimed angrily and anxiously. Ivan immediately realized the gravity of the situation and asked with a frown.
How did you hear about this, and where is Malfoy?
Me, Harry, and Ron, we heard Malfoy and his minions talking about it in the corridor. Let's get over there before they start fighting.
Chapter 481, Malfoy, you ungrateful bastard.
Lupin's finished, Potter, you can't stop me. I will expose him. A dangerous werewolf teaching openly at Hogwarts is gambling with our lives.
Malfoy was making a lot of noise in the empty classroom, looking arrogantly up at Harry and Ron.
Professor Lupin is the best defense against the dark arts professor I've ever known, and he's not dangerous at all, having been at Hogwarts so long and never hurting anyone.
Harry angrily retorted, and seeing Malfoy's indifferent smirk, he pulled his wand out, ready to teach Malfoy a lesson.
You think you can take me on, Potter?
Malfoy sneered, holding out his wand, as did Goyle. For a time, the two sides faced each other, and the atmosphere was tense. Just as they were about to attack, the classroom door opened. Harry and Malfoy both looked pleasantly surprised and turned away, but Malfoy's face darkened when he saw who it was.
Ivan, you're just in time. Malfoy is going to tell the Ministry about Professor Lupin.
Harry exclaimed.
I know, Hermione told me on the way.
Yvonne nodded, then turned her attention to Malfoy. Malfoy looked nervous and took a few steps back.
Hars, what do you think you're doing? I'm warning you, I've sent Crabbe to find the professor and the Aurors. They'll be here any minute.
It was then that Yvonne realized that Clark, who was always behind Malfoy, was not there, and she was troubled. In all fairness, other than his status as a werewolf, Lupin had been a very competent professor throughout the school year, and his teaching skills were far superior to those of Chino and Lockhart. Ivan naturally didn't want Lupin to go back to his homeless lifestyle because of his exposure. Ivan, however, was put in a difficult position by Malfoy, who was threatening to report Lupin. The easiest thing to do now, of course, was to use the memory charm, but with Harry and the others still around, and Clark going straight to the professor, it would be pointless to wipe Malfoy's memory. Ivan sighed and tried to persuade her otherwise.
Malfoy, Professor Lupin is no threat to us. He takes his wolfsbane potion regularly every month, and while he's in his transformation, he hides in the shrieking shack so as not to harm us.
Lupin's finished, Potter, you can't stop me. I will expose him. A dangerous werewolf teaching openly at Hogwarts is gambling with our lives. Malfoy was making a lot of noise in the empty classroom, looking arrogantly up at Harry and Ron. Professor Lupin is the best defense against the dark arts professor I've ever known, and he's not dangerous at all, having been at Hogwarts so long and never hurting anyone. Harry angrily retorted, and seeing Malfoy's indifferent smirk, he pulled his wand out, ready to teach Malfoy a lesson. You think you can take me on, Potter? Malfoy sneered, holding out his wand, as did Goyle. For a time, the two sides faced each other, and the atmosphere was tense. Just as they were about to attack, the classroom door opened. Harry and Malfoy both looked pleasantly surprised and turned away, but Malfoy's face darkened when he saw who it was. Ivan, you're just in time. Malfoy is going to tell the Ministry about Professor Lupin, Harry exclaimed. I know, Hermione told me on the way. Yvonne nodded, then turned her attention to Malfoy. Malfoy looked nervous and took a few steps back. Hars, what do you think you're doing? I'm warning you, I've sent Crabbe to find the professor and the Aurors. They'll be here any minute. It was then that Yvonne realized that Clark, who was always behind Malfoy, was not there, and she was troubled. In all fairness, other than his status as a werewolf, Lupin had been a very competent professor throughout the school year, and his teaching skills were far superior to those of Chino and Lockhart. Ivan naturally didn't want Lupin to go back to his homeless lifestyle because of his exposure. Ivan, however, was put in a difficult position by Malfoy, who was threatening to report Lupin. The easiest thing to do now, of course, was to use the memory charm, but with Harry and the others still around, and Clark going straight to the professor, it would be pointless to wipe Malfoy's memory. Ivan sighed and tried to persuade her otherwise. Malfoy, Professor Lupin is no threat to us. He takes his wolfsbane potion regularly every month, and while he's in his transformation, he hides in the shrieking shack so as not to harm us.
What does that have to do with me? Who knows if he's faking it? Malfoy, you ungrateful bastard. If Ivan hadn't saved you last time, Buckbeak would have killed you.
Ron shouted angrily. Malfoy's face turned red, and he loudly defended himself for letting Hagrid and his stupid bird off the hook. Moreover, he chose to expose Lupin for the sake of everyone's safety. After all, what if Lupin forgot to drink his medicine that day and went berserk in school? Furious, Harry tried to punch Malfoy but was stopped by Ivan, who looked at Malfoy and tried to calm him down.
Malfoy, after a year of defense against the dark arts, you should know what Professor Lupin is like. Or would you rather have the next Lockhart or the next Professor Chino to teach you?
Malfoy hesitated, as he had not intended to report Lupin. After all, this year's defense against the dark arts class was very interesting, but he was not happy to see Ivan in the limelight today. Why did Ivan have to hide the fact that he had been able to see through the professor's identity all these years? This is unfair. There was nothing Ivan could do about Malfoy's stubbornness, other than lament that Voldemort's curse was extraordinary and that the defense against the dark arts professor could not be replaced every year. Harry and Ron, on the other hand, did not give up and tried to use force to get Malfoy to change his mind, but Malfoy would rather die than admit defeat.
Mr. Malfoy, I hear you have something for me.
While they were arguing, the classroom door opened again, and a high-pitched voice came in. Even without hearing the voice, Ivan knew it was Umbridge. As expected, a pair of pointed leather shoes stepped through the door, and a middle-aged witch in a pink cardigan came in. She was followed by several Aurors and several professors, as well as Malfoy's missing sidekick Crabbe. When she saw Ivan and the others confronting Malfoy, Umbridge was overjoyed. Prior to this, Umbridge had been annoyed when Clark informed her that Malfoy had something important to report to her. What could a third-year brat possibly have to report that was so important? But now that she saw the confrontation in the classroom, her interest was piqued. They might actually know something important. If he could get a hold of Dumbledore and get the Ministry to turn the tables on him, he might be able to move up the ladder. Umbridge cast a casual glance at the professors around her and saw the slight change in their expressions.
Mr. Malfoy, if there's anything you want to say now, don't worry about anyone hurting you, the Ministry will see to it.
Chapter 482. Yes, I want to report Headmaster Dumbledore. Dumbledore was also looking at Malfoy, his eyebrows raised slightly, knowing that the Ministry would use the exposure of the Lupin werewolf to attack him. Malfoy seemed quite pleased with himself and enjoyed the attention he was receiving. Malfoy hesitated when he noticed the desolate look on Lupin's face. Umbridge waited for Malfoy to speak, but he did not, so she said,
Mr. Malfoy, if you have something to say, you'd better say it quickly. We don't have all day.
I want to report.
Malfoy dragged his voice out, his eyes lingering on Lupin for a moment before turning back to Ivan.
I will report Headmaster Dumbledore.
When Malfoy finished, there was a stunned silence. Harry, Ron, Lupin, and Snape stared at him in shock, not expecting Malfoy to turn on Dumbledore. Was Malfoy trying to accuse him of hiring a werewolf to teach at Hogwarts? Dumbledore, on the other hand, looked at Malfoy with interest. Umbridge was so excited that she quickly questioned him.
Mr. Malfoy, you want to report the headmaster of Hogwarts, and for what? For embezzling money from the school board and the Ministry of Magic, or for doing something really out of line?
Umbridge looked expectantly at Malfoy, even going so far as to give him examples, stating that the Ministry of Magic most admired his fearlessness towards power and would deal with him fairly. However, Malfoy's next words caused Umbridge's smile to falter.
I want to report him for treating the students of the various academies differently despite being the headmaster.
Mr. Malfoy, if you have something to say, you'd better say it quickly. We don't have all day. I want to report.
That's all you have to say?
Umbridge asked, her eyes widening.
Of course, what else would you expect?
Malfoy said casually.
You misunderstand me, Mr. Malfoy.
Dumbledore stepped forward before Umbridge could reply, looking at Malfoy and replying solemnly.
I think it's worth explaining that I'm adding an unprecedented 300 points to Mr. Harles's tally, and not just because he managed to capture Peter Pettigrew and discredit the Death Eater hero, Mr. Black. Also because I received a letter from the Order of Merlin confirming that Mr. Harles was about to receive the Order of Merlin. I put the two things together.
At this, Dumbledore turned his attention to Ivan. Yvonne nodded quickly. Yes, that was exactly what he was thinking. Lupin, watching from the sidelines, felt his heart relax, and he gave Malfoy a grateful look. He did not know why Malfoy had changed his mind at the last minute, but Malfoy did choose to let him go. Snape's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. His lips quivered, but he did not speak. Nobody was more upset than Umbridge, who had not come here to listen to Dumbledore's side with Gryffindor House.
Malfoy, I remember when Mr. Crabbe brought me here. He said you had something important to report.
Umbridge deliberately emphasized the word.
Major.
And then threatened.
You should understand that fooling the ministry is not funny.
Whatever you think, that's all I'm saying, and you can tell my dad.
Malfoy pursed his lips, unconcerned with Umbridge's threat.
Lady Umbridge, please be lenient with a child.
Dumbledore said helpfully.
Malfoy dared to point out some of my faults, and while there was some misunderstanding, it was a commendable attitude. I apologize for my neglect and promise to treat all houses more fairly in future.
Dumbledore apologized and took the lead in applauding. His eyes swept over the professors, who immediately understood and joined in. Ivan, who also had a taste of Dumbledore's ideas. Harry and Ron were initially unhappy, but when Hermione whispered that Malfoy still had something on Professor Lupin, they reluctantly clapped their hands. The classroom erupted in applause. Malfoy, in the face of this, was stunned, his cheeks turning red, and he was at a loss. This was the first time he had been publicly praised by Dumbledore, not to mention being applauded by his sworn enemies, much to Malfoy's discomfort. Umbridge stared at Dumbledore, certain that there was something fishy going on, and even suspecting that Dumbledore had done something to Malfoy right under her nose to force him to change his mind. Umbridge turned to Goyle and Crabbe and questioned them.
What about you, gentlemen? Anything you want to tell me?
Goyle and Crabbe shook their heads hesitantly. In fact, they were quite confused. Malfoy had told them that he was going to expose Lupin for being a werewolf wizard, and now he was accusing Dumbledore of being unfair to the houses. However, as a qualified follower, one thing was clear: no matter how stupid one was, one should never go against the wishes of one's followers.
Good.
Chapter 483, I Can See It Now. Now that the matter was settled, no one gathered in the small classroom.
I don't understand. Why should Professor Dumbledore applaud Malfoy? Malfoy was the one who wanted to get rid of Professor Lupin, and now he's going back on his word. Why should we praise him?
In the corridor of Hogwarts Castle, Ron was still thinking about what had happened in the classroom and complained.
What choice do we have? If Malfoy had said anything more, Professor Lupin's identity would have been exposed.
Hermione explained, sticking her tongue out before continuing.
Perhaps to Professor Dumbledore, Malfoy was like a small, crying child who needed to be comforted by dessert.
Harry and Ron couldn't help but laugh at Hermione's apt analogy. Ivan also smiled, although he did not think Dumbledore's idea was that simple. Even the old professor's casual gestures were a form of guidance, presumably to show Malfoy another path to fame, flowers, and glory, and not to draw attention to himself with bad ideas.
That's impossible.
As Yvonne was thinking about this, Hermione looked at the report card in her hand and screamed.
What's wrong?
Yvonne looked at her in surprise.
I only got an A passed in divination. I've never had such a low rating.
Hermione exclaimed in disappointment, then muttered under her breath that she should have known better. Harry and Ron both rolled their eyes when they heard this. Most of their transcripts were A's passed, but defense against the dark arts, divination, and herbology were E's exceeding expectations. Ron said,
If you told Professor Trelawney that we were all going to fall to our deaths tomorrow, she would have given you the highest praise.
Hermione shook her head. After the last two prophecies, she was very sensitive about such things, and she certainly did not talk nonsense. What if they came true? Given that they would be leaving Hogwarts together on the train that afternoon, they chatted as they returned to their dormitories to pack. Of course, only Harry and Ron were there to clean up. With a casual wave of her wand, the bedding and a large amount of clothing flew into the air and folded themselves in midair before being stored in a small suitcase that had been enchanted with an extension charm. It was the same with books and other miscellaneous items, which were sorted out in minutes.
Is this one of your magical creations? How convenient.
Harry watched with envy as Ivan hefted the suitcase, then looked at his own bulky suitcase.
Yes, I made it myself. If everything goes well, you'll be able to buy it before the next year.
Ivan said with a smile. This portable suitcase was another example of his alchemical prowess. After reading Burke's alchemy books, Ivan extracted the corresponding runes and studied them for some time, combining them into a sequence of runes that had the same effect as the extension charm, allowing the object to be expanded. This time, when he went back, he would teach this magical sequence to Alicia, and his shop would have one more magical item on sale. After lunch, Ivan and the others boarded the carriage parked on the soft stone road and made their way to Hogwarts station. Hermione stared out of the window, mesmerized, at the emaciated creature in front of the carriage that seemed to have oversized bat wings. Ivan followed Hermione's gaze and saw that she was looking at the Strauss.
What are you looking at? There's nothing there.
Harry asked curiously, and Ron looked puzzled.
This drow.
Hermione began to explain, but Harry and the others looked puzzled.
These carriages do not move through the air, but are pulled by the Strauss, which are,
At this, Hermione couldn't help thinking of Luna, pursing her lips and then cheering up, murmuring to herself.
But now I can see it too.
Chapter 484, Leaving School and Growing the Task Progress. With this in mind, Ivan suddenly realized that there was a lot to do this summer. However, before he went home, he had to go to the Black family home and destroy the Horcrux. Yvonne felt uneasy about leaving something so important lying around. What if she lost it? Even if it was left untouched, it was likely to confuse Harry and the others, who were planning to visit the Black family home. Therefore, a few days ago, Ivan sent a letter to Alicia, saying that he would go to his friend's house first this summer and bring back some precious books so that he would not have to come to Kingdom Cross Station to pick him up. When he got Slytherin's locket, he would simply use Transfiguration to return to his dark arts shop.
Wait a minute.
After reading the school year summary, Ivan glanced at the mission column and found that the progress of the mission to become the king of Knockoff Alley seemed to have increased by 1%. Yvonne wondered if she'd misremembered.
Come here, children, line up and get in.
In the crowd, Hagrid was trying to maintain order as he directed the young wizards to board the train. It had to be said that he was well suited to the task, his large frame clearly visible in the crowd.
Harry, over here.
Hagrid called out happily when he saw Ivan and the others. Harry happily hugged Hagrid goodbye and boarded the train home, watching Hogwarts Castle disappear into the distance as the train chugged away.
Professor Lupin, why are you here?
Ivan asked, surprised. Professors at Hogwarts usually stayed at the castle during the summer holidays, as food and lodging were provided, especially for professors like Lupin, who did not own a house.
Is it because of where you're going this summer, Professor?
Hermione asked, her mind working quickly as she considered the possibilities. Hermione, however, miscalculated, and Lupin shook his head.
No, I had no such intention. It's just that I handed in my resignation to Headmaster Dumbledore a few days ago, and as such, I am not permitted to remain at Hogwarts, as per the rules.
Ron looked at Lupin in shock and could not help but question him.
It had to be Malfoy, didn't it?
Harry said angrily, thinking of Malfoy.
He must have told the Ministry about you in secret, and I'm going to beat him up.
Harry pulled out his wand, intending to confront Malfoy, but was stopped by Lupin.
It wasn't like that, Harry. It had nothing to do with Malfoy, or anyone else. I made the choice.
Lupin said with a bitter smile. He was not lying, and no one complained about his cover being blown. However, Lupin also knew that this would not last long, as Umbridge, who had been rebuffed at school, would most likely be trying to identify him. More importantly, Snape's malice towards him was growing day by day, and there was no telling when it would explode, so rather than having his identity revealed next year and tarnishing the school's reputation, he might as well just leave. Harry did not understand this and was unable to accept the fact that Lupin had left, so he tried to dissuade him.
What about next year's defense against the dark arts class if you leave? We can't do without you. Yes, you're the best defense against the dark arts professor there is. I don't want Headmaster Dumbledore hiring a Lockhart, or a Chino for that matter.
Ron tried to persuade him otherwise.
Don't worry, it won't. The next defense against the dark arts professor is a very good man. You'll learn a lot from him.
Lupin smiled, comforting Harry and the others before continuing.
And Malfoy was right about the last time. It was irresponsible of me to teach at Hogwarts under the guise of a werewolf.
Despite Lupin's words, Harry, Ron, and Hermione were not happy. Yvonne raised her eyebrows in surprise, The next defense against the dark arts professor had been decided so early. Mad-Eye Moody thought Ivan. However, it made sense. Normally, every defense against the dark arts professor would have a problem at the end of the term, so it was normal to pick someone in advance.
By the way, Professor Lupin, have you thought about what you're going to do in the future?
Yvonne asked.
Not at the moment.
Lupin shook his head hesitantly, then smiled freely.
Of course, you don't have to worry about me. It's not like it used to be. Sirius offered to take me in, and I can stay with him until I find a job.
You'll be staying with Sirius. That's great. We'll be able to see each other more often during the summer holidays.
Chapter 493. 493. The poor mistress would go mad if she knew this 2 years ago. Chapter 485. The poor mistress would go mad if she knew this.
Are you ready, Hales? We don't have to go to Kingdom Cross Station. We can just use Transfiguration here.
Ivan asked. He knew Sirius's home address, of course, but he had to have been there before he could perform a transfiguration, or there could be a deviation.
Oh, I almost forgot. Lupin will take you then.
Sirius said awkwardly. Fortunately, Lupin had to go this time, or he would not have had enough magic to transport the two of them so far.
Ivan, remember to write to me during the summer holidays.
Hermione suddenly reminded him. Then the little witch seemed to remember something and stared at him fiercely.
Don't you dare forget this time.
Of course, I promise. I'll write to you as soon as I get back, okay?
Yvonne nodded, as if she had committed the letter to memory. Sirius watched this with a smile, and the little witch, having received a positive response from Ivan, pushed her suitcase and ran through the connecting walls towards King's Cross Station. Ivan, Lupin, Sirius, and Harry were left behind as the crowd dispersed. Like Ivan, Harry did not plan to go straight home, but instead planned to stay with Sirius for a few days. As for the Dursleys, Harry asked Hedwig to give them a letter 2 days ago, and they were so happy about it that they wished he would never return.
Come on, we're going to Grimmauld Place.
Sirius said to Ivan and Lupin, taking Harry by the hand. Lupin nodded, grabbed Ivan's wrist and waved his wand.
Disillusionment.
As the incantation was spoken, Ivan felt himself being sucked into a narrow space, his body spinning inside before being kicked out again. When he came to his senses, he found himself standing in the corner of the alley.
We're in luck. No muggles have been through here.
Sirius said, looking around to make sure the alley was clear and leading the way out. Ivan, Harry, and Lupin followed. Beyond the alley was a small square, somewhat rundown, with cracked and unattended stone tiles, through which weeds stubbornly poked, and only the distant sound of Muggle traffic horns could be heard.
Sirius, are we there yet?
Harry asked.
Yes, that's right. That's it, 12 Grimmauld Place.
Sirius said, looking at the mansions behind the square and pointing to a sign above one of the gates. Ivan looked over and saw the mansion Sirius was pointing at. It seemed that this place had not been designated as the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, and the Fidelius charm had been placed on it. Otherwise, he would not have been able to see it. However, the house had fallen into disrepair. The windows above were broken and the walls were filthy. Even the paint on the door was peeling. Harry was also looking at it with a look of astonishment, apparently having not expected the Sirius home to be so run down. Sirius cleared his throat and hurried to explain.
Don't be fooled by the appearance of this house. That's because it hasn't been lived in for too long. After I take care of it with the restoration charm and the dust-removing charm, it will be very comfortable here.
Harry didn't care what the house looked like, he was just surprised. They climbed the ragged steps to the front door. The front door was simple and unadorned, and for some reason it was covered in scratches. The silver knocker was shaped like a coiled snake, and there were no keyholes or letter boxes. Sirius pulled out his wand and tapped it on the door, causing it to rattle, and a moment later the door creaked open.
All right, we can go in.
Sirius casually led the way for Ivan and the others, but when they entered, he frowned. Because the house was dark and filled with a musty, rotten smell, the floor and walls were covered in a thick layer of dust, and there were cobwebs in some of the corners. Sirius noticed this and his face fell. Although he had been back before, he had been on his own and had only returned to pick up some things before leaving, not caring if the place was broken or not.
Clean it up.
Sirius hurriedly cast a spell with his wand. A storm of magic swept through the living room, blowing a cloud of dust and sand into the air, where it formed a ball and flew out the broken window. The dark living room suddenly became cleaner, though it was still a little messy. Sirius, on the other hand, would be exhausted, gasping for breath as he looked around at the huge house. For the first time, he wished the house were smaller so he could clean it.
It looks like a lot of work, let's all help.
Lupin laughed at Sirius's pathetic state.
Well, it would be quicker if we cleaned them separately.
Ivan suggested, taking the opportunity to find where the Horcruxes were kept. Yvonne was pretty sure it was in this room, but she couldn't have memorized the exact location.
What about me? I haven't learned that kind of magic yet.
Harry asked nervously. Sirius and the others seemed to think that cleaning was a different kind of magic than he thought. But he doesn't know the dust-repelling charm.
It's all right, just stick with me, I'll teach you myself.
Sirius tried to comfort Harry after a short break. Just as they were about to move, a low, tinny voice called out. Chapter 486, Poor Old Creature. Harry was startled by the sudden noise. Ivan wasn't surprised to see a house elf standing on the stairs. It was very old, with a wrinkled face and a dirty rag around its waist. It looked as if it had not bathed in days, and its large, bat-like ears were covered in white hair.
Creature, why don't you clean this room when no one's around?
Sirius scolded the house elf when he saw it, his face red and angry. The house elf creature did not reply, but looked down at his toes and muttered to himself.
Oh, poor old creature, his mistress dead, the noble blacks in prison, the old creature thinking they would never come back.
But why did it have to be like this? A wastrel who was expelled from the family tree actually had the cheek to bring his nasty children into this place after so many years.
Before Creature could finish, Sirius snapped.
That's enough, shut up.
Sirius was shouting, almost growling. Creature's body trembled, and his face contorted in panic when Sirius threatened to disown him.
Yes, master.
Creature hesitated, then reluctantly snapped his fingers and disappeared. However, the faint murmur of Creature's voice before he left could still be heard.
It should be the prodigal son and his unpleasant friends who get out.
Sirius's face darkened. He wanted to call Creature back and give him a good thrashing, but he resisted. He turned to Ivan and the others and spoke to them in a resigned tone.
I'm sorry to have embarrassed myself in front of you. I'll discipline it well in the future.
Harry said, thinking of Creature's old, dirty face and feeling sorry for him.
You don't understand, Harry. That Creature was corrupted by my mother and absorbed a lot of ugly, pure-blood theories from her.
Sirius shook his head. He knew all too well about the pure-blood theories of the Black family that had led to their downfall.
Well, let's go clean up, shall we? Creature alone would take days, and I don't want to live in a place full of dust and cobwebs.
Lupin laughed, changing the subject.
Well, let's start with the first floor.
Sirius nodded, then patted Harry on the shoulder.
Harry, you're with me.
After the discussion, they split up, and Ivan joined them in the first-floor kitchen. It was even dirtier than he had expected. The walls were covered in grease, the cookware was covered in a thick layer of dust, the bin was lying on the floor, and the entire kitchen smelled disgusting. When he opened the door, the smell almost killed Ivan.
Clean it up.
Ivan chanted, covering his nose as he tried to sweep away the filth on the walls. However, it was too filthy, and even when the magic swept through the kitchen like a brush, it was unable to remove the filth. Instead, it caused a large number of strange little things to crawl out of the cupboards and tables in a panic. Ivan even saw a creature that looked like a silver snuff box being pushed out of the cupboard and into the ground, where it rolled away and hid in a corner. Ivan, of course, knew exactly what these creatures were. They were as nasty as the cockroaches and mice of the Muggle world, hiding in every nook and cranny of the room to steal food and spread germs, and they were strange-looking but of little research value.
Creature, what are you always following me around for? Didn't Sirius tell you to clean the other rooms?
Chapter 487, Regulus Arcturus Black.
Creature's working all the time, sir.
The elderly house elf swept a broom gently across the floor twice, but kept his eyes fixed on Ivan, his mouth flat and his voice just loud enough for Ivan to hear.
The wicked whelp must be trying to distract Creature so he can steal something.
Ivan's mouth twitched as he realized how Sirius must have felt. If he had had a house elf like this, he would have gagged him. Ivan's change of expression was noted by the elderly house elf, who looked at him with dark disdain and muttered under his breath.
Sir must have been thinking about how to get rid of Creature.
Creature's working all the time, sir.
Shut up, can you stop getting conspiracy theories into your head? Nobody's going to try to kill you.
Ivan interrupted Creature, rolling his eyes.
And I need to remind you that there are some things you shouldn't say out loud if you don't want to be overheard. Keep them to yourself, understand?
Ivan had a strong suspicion that Creature's sarcastic whispers were meant to be overheard. Creature's mouth curled and his long, pointed ears drooped. He did not speak again, but he did not leave. Ivan shook his head, unable to do anything about it. In fact, the fastest way to find out the exact location of Slytherin's locket was to ask Creature directly. However, this house elf clearly did not trust him enough to reveal the whereabouts of the locket. She might even think that he was after it and try to hide it. Ivan's head was beginning to hurt when a wild, blood-curdling noise came from outside.
Get out of here, you filthy pest, you damned lowlife, and get out of this house. How dare you defile the noble black compound?
The high-pitched voice of a woman broke the silence of the house. Creature, who was guarding the door, turned pale. He snapped his fingers and disappeared. Ivan frowned and left the room, heading in the direction of the voice. He spotted Lupin in the corridor. Lupin stood awkwardly in front of the half-opened velvet draperies, not knowing what to do. Behind the draperies was a life-size portrait of an elderly woman in a black hat, screaming and cursing. At the sight of Ivan, the old lady's face twisted into a scowl.
Oh my God, another one who gave you permission to come in. This is the Black family home, get out, get out.
The high-pitched shriek was so loud that Ivan could hear it even with his hands over his ears. Creature, a grubby house elf, was watching them from around the corner, murmuring to himself. The scream didn't last long as Sirius, having heard the commotion, charged towards them.
Shut up, you old hag, you're the one who needs to get out of here. Any more noise and I'll throw you in the forge and burn you.
Sirius cursed, taking a few steps towards the curtain. But it was as if the thing had been bewitched. No matter how hard he tried, it would not move. The cursing of the old lady in the portrait grew louder and louder.
You despicable wastrel, the disgrace of the family, the spawn of my blood. How dare you return?
Lupin, Harry, Ivan, come and help.
Sirius couldn't pull the curtain alone, so he had no choice but to ask Ivan and the others for help. When the piercing screams died away, everyone in the room breathed a sigh of relief.
I'm sorry, Sirius, I didn't know it was here. I just wanted to clean the draperies.
Lupin apologized.
No, none of your business. I neglected to remind you of that.
Sirius shook his head.
Sirius, who was in that portrait?
Harry asked curiously.
That was my mother, a thoroughly stubborn, staunch pureblood who discriminated against all non-pureblood wizards and forbade them to set foot in the house. Except, of course, for my uncle and my opinionless brother. Everyone else in the Black family had a similar problem.
Sirius said angrily, then looked at the draperies.
Anyway, I'll get rid of the portrait sometime. The end of this thing should be the furnace.
Creature muttered to himself.
Innocent wastrel, poor mistress is dead and he plans to destroy her portrait.
Sirius threatened, turning to look at the elderly house elf. Creature, however, didn't care. As a house elf, punishment was a common occurrence and tearing lips didn't seem like such a big deal, so he didn't stop talking.
The mistress is very severe, Miss Bellatrix is very clever, young Master Regulus is very brave.
Sirius heard Creature's words and laughed disdainfully.
You say that my mother is harsh and I admit it, and that my cousin is cunning, but you say that Regulus is brave.
Sirius then added sarcastically, as if he had just thought of something. Creature's working all the time, sir.
Who is Regulus? Did you say he sided with Lord Voldemort?
Sirius smiled wryly, sighing as he spoke.
Regulus was my brother, a cowardly fool.
Chapter 488, Horcruxes and Whereabouts and Past Events. When Harry didn't seem to understand, Sirius explained.
Now that you've met my mother, I'm sure you can see something of her. My parents were staunch supporters of pedigree, mad fans of pure bloods, and believed that being a black was inherently noble.
Now that you've met my mother, I'm sure you can see something of her. My parents were staunch supporters of pedigree, mad fans of pure bloods, and believed that being a black was inherently noble.
And what happened to him?
Harry asked curiously.
Died.
Sirius's voice dripped with sarcasm.
Not killed by an Auror in battle, but by Lord Voldemort. It is possible, of course, that Lord Voldemort instructed someone to kill him.
Harry was shocked and confused. Why would Voldemort kill his own men? Sirius saw Harry's confusion and went on.
I don't know exactly why, but my guess is that he joined the Death Eaters simply to please his parents and didn't realize how cruel it was.
Now that you've met my mother, I'm sure you can see something of her. My parents were staunch supporters of pedigree, mad fans of pure bloods, and believed that being a black was inherently noble.
Creature, what can I do for you, sir?
The elderly house elf seemed to be in a foul mood, and his usual peremptory manner was gone. His eyes were moist as if he had been crying.
I've heard a lot about Regulus from Sirius, and I'm very interested in him. Can you tell me about him?
Ivan asked. Perhaps thinking this was too abrupt, Ivan added.
I meant no harm by it, but when Sirius introduced his brother, you seemed upset, as if you had a different opinion. I wondered if there might have been a misunderstanding.
Creature stared at Ivan with his bulb-sized eyes, then left without another word. Ivan understood that she did not trust him, so he sighed helplessly and tried to comfort her.
It doesn't matter if you don't trust me. You can tell Sirius that he still cares about his brother.
Although Sirius's earlier words were full of derision and disdain for his younger brother, Ivan could tell that Sirius was genuinely concerned about Regulus. Creature shuddered but did not look back. He simply snapped his fingers and vanished. Yvonne shook her head, unsure if he was listening. Early the next morning, after washing up and yawning, Ivan retired to the first-floor drawing room to enjoy his breakfast. Harry, Lupin, and Sirius were already there, and he was the last to arrive.
Ivan, how was your night? Getting used to it.
Sirius asked with a smile.
It's nice, it's the first time I've lived in a mansion this size.
Yvonne teased as she found a seat.
You're welcome to come whenever you like. Anyway, let's eat, and I'll take you to the Black's library.
Sirius clapped his hands. Old Creature appeared in front of everyone with a plate in his hand. He lowered his head and placed the plates in front of everyone. Breakfast was Spartan compared to the luxurious decor, with a few bowls of porridge, a few pieces of bread, and some potato chips.
You can take a look in the cupboard in the drawing room on the first floor.
Ivan turned his head to look at it in surprise, but Creature had returned to his normal form and was standing hunched in a corner of the living room, saying nothing. Seeing this, Ivan gave up on the idea of asking any further questions. If Creature said so, he might as well go there himself. After breakfast, Ivan refused Sirius's offer to visit the library, as he wanted to use the library as an excuse to do so. Therefore, Ivan decided to follow Creature's instructions and go downstairs to find out if there was anything he might have missed while cleaning the house.
Why did Creature just say something to you?
Ivan's decision came as a surprise to Sirius, and he certainly noticed Ivan glancing at Creature as they ate, as if they were hiding something from him. After a moment's hesitation, Ivan rehashed the story he had told Creature the night before.
Creature told me to look in the cupboard in the living room on the first floor. Maybe your brother left a letter or something before he died.
Sirius's temper flared, and he glared at the house elf standing in the corner of the room.
How dare you?
Chapter 489, Slytherin's Locket. Creature's face was a mask of fear, but he insisted on saying nothing, allowing Sirius to berate him, murmuring under his breath.
Poor old Creature, he should never have believed the whelp.
Yvonne rolled her eyes. The destruction of the Horcrux was unlikely, and there was no point in keeping it from Sirius. He would have to know sooner or later whether she told him or not. However, Ivan stopped Sirius, who was trying to teach Creature a lesson, and spoke up for him.
I don't think Creature is to blame. Maybe someone put a gag order on it. Let's just go there and find out.
Sirius had calmed down enough to consider the possibility that house elves would not normally disobey their masters, so he gave Creature a dirty look.
Right, let's go. Where to?
Sirius promptly led the group downstairs, Creature following them as they went, stopping at one of the cupboards.
Is it here?
Ivan asked, approaching. Creature nodded hesitantly. Sirius pushed it away, opened the cupboard and rummaged through it, although his actions alerted the creature hiding inside. A creature with many legs and what looked like a silver duster sprang out, its long silver needle-like tail stabbing at Sirius's arm, but he dodged it. Sirius grabbed the black book next to him and slapped it to death, causing more of the creatures to flee in panic, burrowing into the cracks in the floor.
Gosh, I'm going to have to buy some spray and clean the whole house.
Sirius could do nothing about the annoying creatures. However, this was obviously not the time to think about it, so Sirius quickly turned his attention to the cupboard. There was a music box, a hair clip, a bunch of antique seals, a dusty box, and a bunch of junk.
And these are not.
Sirius then threw the Black family's seal, as well as the music box, to the ground and picked up a display case. It was very simple and unadorned with a silver-white chain. The front was like a compass with mysterious runes carved around it and a large S-shaped mark in the middle. It was drawn in the shape of a snake and was inlaid with green gems. It was obviously expensive. However, the Black household was full of such precious antiques, so Sirius did not pay much attention to it at first, until he realized that he could not open it. Ivan's eyes were drawn to it as well. Having been in contact with the Slytherin chamber, he knew full well that the snake-shaped mark was the trademark of Slytherin. He had seen it on the door of the Slytherin laboratory. Apparently, this was Voldemort's fourth Horcrux, the Slytherin locket.
That's it.
Creature whispered to himself. Sirius's head snapped around. He had been watching Creature so he could hear him.
You say Regulus left this behind. Why would he leave it behind, and how do I open it?
Sirius demanded. However, the house elf merely shook his head and muttered that he couldn't say, as his bulb-sized eyes were filled with tears and his nose was twitching. Sirius, however, showed no pity for it and continued to press it for more information. Unable to withstand the pressure from Sirius, the elderly house elf let out a piercing shriek.
Destroy that thing, Master Regulus. Tell Creature to destroy that thing.
Creature's face fell, and he grabbed the book and threw it over his head.
Bad creature, bad, bad creature.
Creature screamed as he smashed the book against his head.
Stop, I said stop.
Sirius grabbed the book and Creature slammed his head against the wall, forcing Sirius to repeat himself several times before the house elf stopped.
You'd better not push it, Sirius. It seems, as I suspected, there are restrictions.
Ivan shook his head at Creature's pathetic state. Ivan then turned his attention to the locket in Sirius's hand and spoke after a moment's hesitation.
I think it looks a bit like something the man left behind.
Sirius was taken aback at first, but when he realized who Ivan was referring to, he frowned.
Yes, when I was in my second year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, I saw something that you know who had left behind, and it felt like this.
Ivan couldn't explain how he had learned that this was Voldemort's Horcrux, so he resorted to falsehoods.
You mean the diary?
Harry immediately remembered that he and Ron had asked Hermione about it, so they knew.
What are you talking about?
Sirius looked at them strangely. Before Ivan could say anything, Harry told Sirius about Lockhart's second year at Hogwarts when he was bewitched by a dark object and attacked a student.
A lot of people were scared out of their wits, and it was Ivan who got rid of Professor Lockhart and destroyed the dark arts artifacts.
Harry excitedly recounted Ivan's glorious history. Sirius and Lupin both looked at Ivan in surprise. They knew that Ivan was no ordinary young wizard, but they had never expected him to have such a legendary experience in his second year. Ivan shrugged. He didn't think the experience was worth bragging about. He'd almost lost his car against a fifth-year Tom Riddle. At that moment, Creature suddenly grabbed Ivan's corner and asked excitedly.
SRD, did you destroy the Dark Lord's belongings? Is that true?
Chapter 490, Sirius the Silent.
Of course, why would I lie to you?
Ivan nodded as Creature looked at him expectantly. The house elf's lips moved and his large eyes filled with tears, but then he remembered the charm of the locket and screamed in disbelief.
Impossible, Creature tried everything. He threw it in the furnace and smashed it with a hammer. Not even a destructive spell could hurt it. I know.
Ivan interrupted Creature.
It's the same with everything else left behind by the dark arts. It takes some special means to destroy it.
He was, of course, well aware of how difficult it was to destroy a Horcrux, and that only a few things, such as fire and basilisk fangs, could do so. More importantly, the locket was inscribed with protective runes, presumably by Slytherin. The Horcrux was hidden inside the locket, and to destroy it, one would have to either open the locket in Parseltongue or face the protection that Slytherin had left behind. Ivan was impressed by how well Voldemort had protected his Horcruxes. For example, placing Ravenclaw's diadem in the room of requirement storeroom was akin to throwing a grain of sand into the desert. Hufflepuff's golden cup was kept at Gringotts, and it was clear that Voldemort was using Gringotts, the safest place in the wizarding world, to guard his Horcruxes. If not for Harry's Horcrux sensor, it would have been extremely difficult to find these Horcruxes. However, this was not the case for an insider like him, who considered most of Voldemort's tricks to be non-existent. Seeing Ivan's confidence, Creature began to believe him.
Hold on, you've got me confused. You've got to tell me why you want to destroy what Regulus left behind, right?
Sirius said, frowning at Creature. However, the house elf only nagged Master Regulus to destroy the locket.
What are your orders, Creature? Not to speak of them to everyone, or to some people.
Lupin ventured, suddenly thinking of the rules of house elves. Creature looked at Sirius and said nothing, and the crowd understood.
Sirius, I think you'll have to excuse us. Creature's orders from Regulus are not to tell the blacks about this.
Ivan said. Sirius was not happy that he was the one who should know the truth. Before Sirius could retort, Ivan shot him a look and mouthed the words.
Phantom curse.
Which Sirius understood and promptly left. Ivan waited for Sirius to return before turning to Creature.
Can you talk now?
He asked. Creature, completely unaware of Ivan and his gang's machinations and completely in the dark, assumed that Sirius had left and told them everything that had happened in the past. When Sirius abandoned his pureblood beliefs at the age of 16, his mother was heartbroken, and other pureblood families began to gossip about the Black family. Regulus joined the Dark Lord's organization as an honorable Death Eater in order to please his family and restore his family's reputation. This was because the Dark Lord's ideals pleased all of the pureblood families and even some of the half-bloods. After all, wizards have magical powers that allow them to fool around with muggles as they please, and are forced by the Ministry of Magic to hide within the wizarding community, much to the displeasure of many wizards who want to change that. The Dark Lord was their hope for change. Because Voldemort promised them that once they were in charge of the wizarding community, all wizards would be able to perform magic freely, even ruling over all Muggle and Muggle descendants.
So Regulus also felt that wizards should rule over Muggles and agree with Voldemort.
Harry couldn't resist interrupting Creature.
Master Regulus says that the rivalry between wizards and Muggles will only grow, and either the Muggles will rise above the wizards, or the wizards will rise above the Muggles.
Creature said, his eyes wide and sobbing.
How is that possible? We're living a good life.
Wizards stay in the wizarding world, they have their own way of life, Muggles have their own way of living, they don't bother each other, and everyone would be fine without Lord Voldemort.
Harry retorted.
Lupin opened his mouth to speak but stopped, and Ivan tried to disagree with Creature but then fell silent. Can Muggles and wizards really be at peace forever? Would a wizard with magical powers be willing to live in peace with ordinary people, without superior thought? Would Muggles, by contrast, allow a dangerous minority of wizards who could fool and purge their memories to exist? Ivan didn't know the answer and didn't want to dwell on it. Creature ignored Harry's remark and continued angrily.
Master Regulus, unlike the bad boy, knew exactly what the name Black and his pure blood meant.
Apparently, it blamed Sirius for Regulus's death. Sirius, who had been hiding in the shadows using the disillusionment charm, fell silent at Creature's words. He ran away from home with alacrity, but he did forget the impact of his decision as the eldest son of the Black family, and the pressure he had to bear as the second son.
Then what? How did he get the locket? What was it for, and why did he destroy it?
Lupin asked.
A year after Master Regulus joined the Dark Lord, he came to the kitchens to see Creature. He said to Creature.
The elderly house elf shrieked.
He said the Dark Lord wanted an elf. Voldemort wants a pixie, why?
Harry was baffled, as was Lupin.
Oh, yes.
Creature looked pained.
It is an honor for Master Regulus to contribute to Creature's cause, and Creature must do as he is told.
Chapter 491, The Story of Regulus. That day, the Dark Lord took it to a cave by the sea, and they sailed across a dark lake to the island in the middle of it.
There was a stone.
Creature shuddered at the memory, his words faltering.
Creature did as he was told and drank it, seeing horrible sights.
Creature's words caused a chill to run down everyone's spine, and the house elf began to weep, describing how much pain she must have been in after taking the potion. Creature needed water, and it crawled to the edge of the island to drink from the black lake.
It should be an inferius under the water. This is a trap laid by Lord Voldemort to protect the locket.
As a member of the Order of the Phoenix, Lupin soon realized what was happening.
But why would Lord Voldemort go to all this trouble to hide it?
Harry asked, puzzled.
It only means that the locket is very important to Voldemort.
Ivan could not bring himself to say that it was a Horcrux, so he tried to remind him indirectly. Lupin, Harry, and Sirius nodded in agreement. The more Voldemort tried to protect something, the more they would destroy it.
No, you said you drank the potion and triggered the trap. How did you get out?
Lupin asked, acutely aware that something was amiss. Master Regulus said he wanted Creature to go home, so Creature went home.
Creature must have used apparition to escape. Voldemort wouldn't have left such an obvious opening. There must be anti-phantom displacement magic in there.
Lupin frowned, unable to believe the man was so stupid.
No, pixie magic is different from wizard magic. It can break through many restrictions, like at Hogwarts, where wizards can't perform apparition, but pixies can do it easily.
Ivan explained. It could only be said that Lord Voldemort was too arrogant, or that wizards were too arrogant and looked down on low-class house elves, and never studied the difference between their magic and that of wizards. As a result, many places seemed heavily guarded, but to house elves they were like sieves.
That's a possibility.
Lupin agreed with Sirius, who was hiding in the shadows. They were the first to know that house elves could break through the anti-phantom disapparition barrier, and Lord Voldemort, who thought highly of himself, was even less likely to know. Creature, the house elf, ignored the comments and continued after a pause.
When we got back, Creature told Master Regulus what had happened.
A little while later,
And he made you drink the potion and take the locket out.
Lupin asked, frowning, but thinking there was more to the story. Creature's next words took everyone by surprise.
No, Master Regulus did not do that.
Creature cried, tears streaming down his long nose as he sobbed. When we got there, the young master took a locket out of his pocket, just like the Dark Lord's. He told Creature to hold on to it until the basin was dry, then he switched the locket and
Regulus drank the potion.
It was a question, but Ivan sounded certain. Lupin and Harry looked at Creature in disbelief. The house elf's face was covered in tears, and his sobs were so broken that it took a lot of concentration to understand what he was saying.
So you just watched. You didn't drink the potion, so why didn't you save him? Why didn't you save him?
Sirius screamed at the top of his lungs, his eyes bloodshot. Creature's eyes went wide, as he had not expected Sirius to be there, and he screamed as he realized that he had broken Regulus's order not to tell his family about the cave.
Shut up, I command you, as the head of the House of Black, to speak up. Why don't you save him?
Sirius roared, speaking directly over Creature's screams.
There were too many of them.
The elderly house elf broke down in sobs.
Excuses, if you knew about the Inferius, why didn't you just take Regulus and leave?
Sirius cut Creature off angrily, his eyes growing red, the locket clinking in his right hand, and his wand glinting dangerously as he glared at Creature.
I don't believe he'd drink that potion in place of a dirty, cheap house elf like you.
Chapter 492, Master and Slave.
You must have killed him, didn't you?
Sirius hissed, kicking Creature to the ground and waving his wand.
Crucius.
In an instant, the spell's beam struck Creature, and the elderly house elf let out a blood-curdling scream and began to writhe on the floor. Nobody else in the room saw Sirius's outburst coming.
Are you mad, Sirius?
Without hesitation, Lupin rushed forward to stop Sirius from torturing Creature any further.
Let go of me and I'll teach it a lesson today.
Sirius's eyes were red with rage, and he tried to break free from Lupin. Afraid to harm Sirius, Lupin tried to force him, but Sirius punched him in the stomach. After freeing himself from Lupin, Sirius took a few steps forward, his eyes bloodshot, and waved his wand at Creature again, shouting.
Powdered body.
Sirius was halfway through his incantation when another voice spoke. A red beam of magical light flashed past, and Sirius was thrown back against the wall as if he had been hit, his wand flying out of his hand and spinning into Ivan's. Ivan took the wand from him, but not without caution, as Sirius was not himself. It did not take long for Ivan to guess that Sirius was under the influence of a Horcrux, and he shouted to Lupin and the others.
Quick, take the locket from him.
Lupin, having recovered from his shock, lunged at Sirius in an attempt to seize the Horcrux. However, the latter seemed to have lost her mind and desperately tried to protect the locket in her hand. The two of them wrestled, and the locket fell to the ground with a soft sound. Harry took the opportunity to pick up Slytherin's locket and throw it back at Ivan. Just as he was about to let go of the locket, however, Harry stopped short, as he felt a stabbing pain in the scar on his head. Luckily, Ivan stepped in and took the Horcrux, allowing Harry to regain his composure.
Come to your senses, Harry, are you all right?
Ivan asked, looking worried. Harry shook his head to show that he was fine, apart from the pain in his scar, and then, remembering Sirius, ran to him, worried. The Horcrux quivered uneasily in Ivan's hand, and Ivan was vaguely aware of an intrusion into his brain. He instinctively activated occlumency, and the feeling quickly disappeared. Apparently, occlumency at level 6 was quite powerful, as Horcruxes could not affect him. Sirius, now under Lupin's control, was now back to normal. He clearly remembered all of his actions, but they seemed so foreign to him.
I'm sorry, Lupin.
Sirius apologized to Lupin, looking awkwardly at Harry and Ivan.
That was quite a punch, but I'm not that weak.
Lupin teased, not caring about the incident. Lupin's gaze then returned to the Horcrux in Ivan's hand, and he continued confidently.
It would seem that this locket affected your emotions.
Sirius and Harry looked over as well.
Yes, Lupin was right, it affects the mind. Professor Lockhart was killed by the same thing when he was in school.
Ivan explained as he fiddled with his Horcrux. As far as he knew, every Horcrux created by Voldemort possessed the ability to bewitch the mind. Based on the time of Regulus's death, Slytherin's locket must have been a Horcrux created by Lord Voldemort in his prime, much more powerful than the diadem and diadem, in order to affect Sirius without his knowledge. This, of course, had something to do with Sirius losing control of his emotions after hearing about Regulus, and the Horcrux only inflamed his emotions, driving him mad.
It's too dangerous, we'd better destroy it now.
Sirius said solemnly, still fearful of the evil thoughts that had come to him. Ivan nodded. Destroying Horcruxes was not difficult for him, and it was not the first time he had done so.
But I think you forgot to apologize to the other one.
Ivan said, looking at Creature, who was trembling on the floor. Creature was a bad elf.
You mean you want me to apologize to Creature?
Sirius frowned, sounding reluctant.
Sirius, I also think you should apologize, you nearly killed it.
Harry tried to help him, looking at the poor house elf lying on the floor with sympathy.
Creature didn't do anything wrong, did he? He did his best to do Regulus's bidding, and he was a wonderful house elf. Come on, you've probably forgotten how it used to call you guys.